go. And we're live from. Uh-oh. Hold on a second. Let me. All right, sorry about that. Hey guys, New Year, happy 2025, and welcome to episode 53 of the FilmBrony Podcast. I know we originally had plans to schedule this one for New Year's Eve, but the problem was I wanted to spend time with my family, and another problem on why we're doing this late is because I unfortunately had COVID. So, but thankfully I'm a lot better now. So that's why I'm all ready to do this. And with me, I'm not always alone. I'm not alone on this one. With me, I have a guest who has made the podcast. So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Going Globes, you had a pretty neat lineup for your Best Picture musical or comedy category. You had Anora, you had A Real Pain, you had The Substance, you had Wicked, and I didn't exactly love Challenges, but that was a good movie. But of all these movies, you pick Amelia Perez.
Which made no sense whatsoever. Like really. But yes, this is Søren, and boy, we got a really good show for you guys tonight. Well, we're going over the remaining films that came out in 2024, and um today's a very special show too, because we're going to be going over our list of the 15 worst films that we saw in 2024. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be a really good show. So, and in the meantime, let's go over what we usually do, starting with the Blu-ray showcase.
All right, Across the Universe.
Nice.
Alien Romulus.
That's a good one.
Barnyard. Begin Again.
That's a really good movie.
Civil War. Conclave.
I also have Conclave. And when this happens, yep, here it is, Conclave.
This date night classics collection, we have Barefoot in the Park, To Catch a Thief, and Love Story. All three Deadpool movies. Eddie Murphy Raw.
That's a good one.
Event Horizon. Godzilla -1. Heavy Metal. Halloween H2O, hands down the best sequel.
Yeah, really.
Hocus Pocus.
Nice.
The first two Jurassic World movies, just the first two. Kill.
That's a good one.
Knuckles.
Nice.
The first four Mad Max movies. Nanny McPhee Returns. Red Rocket.
Ooh. Yeah.
This Small Axe collection, this series that Steve McQueen did between Blitz and Widows.
Nice.
Stronger.
That's a great film.
My guilty pleasure of the year, Trap, Twisters,
That's a good one.
and I have one more, but I'll save it for a special time this podcast.
Sweet. All right. So I have I got tons and tons of Blu-rays up for this podcast today. So this is how I arranged them. I arranged them from like Sony Pictures Classics to like A24, and then some of the ones some of the 2015 to 2024 ones, all the way to Criterion. So we're gonna start out with the Sony Pictures Classics, starting with Before Midnight.
That's a really good one. I have all three in the Criterion box set.
Nice. One of my favorite movies of 2016, and I feel this is Paul Verhoeven's best movie, Elle.
That's a really good one.
Next up, Pedro Almodovar's Julieta.
I'll have to see that. I have that one.
It was a great movie. Definitely one of his best he's done. Next up, Brigsby Bear.
Overlooked one.
Yeah, really. It was a great movie. Next up, the documentary film Maiden.
Okay.
And then another Pedro Almodovar film that was one of my favorite movies of 2019, Pain and Glory.
Another one I'll have to see.
And then I should have put this on my best of 2022 list because I really love this movie, and it's one I feel is very overlooked. The Duke. And now for the A24 ones. I have three, starting with one of my favorite movies of 2023, The Zone of Interest.
Truly is one of the best last year or 2 years before.
Mm-hmm. Next up, Love Lies Bleeding.
Really like that one.
Mm-hmm. And then one of my favorite movies of 2024, I Saw the TV Glow.
One of the best last year.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. And now now here comes the next 12, starting with the ones from like 2015 all the way through 2024. Mad Max Fury Road. Dee Dee.
Heard good things about that one.
It's really good. Check it out. Strange Darling.
Another one I heard good things.
Again, check it out. My favorite anime film of the year, The Wild Robot.
I'll have to get that one.
And then Søren mentioned this. Søren mentioned this one, and it's another one of my favorites of this year, Conclave. And then another great film from 2024, Saturday Night.
Another one I'll have to get.
Mm-hmm.
Probably for my birthday.
And last but not least are the 5 Criterion films. Starting with Moonstruck.
Recently saw that one. It's a really good movie.
I loved it. I think it's one of the best films of the 80s. Speaking of 80s, Raging Bull.
Really good one.
Yep. By Martin Scorsese. My all-time favorite filmmaker. And then next up, Thelma and Louise.
Great film.
A great film. And then my favorite film of 2007 and one of the best movies to win Best Picture, No Country for Old Men.
You know, I hear some people complain about the last act, but I really didn't have any problem with that.
I didn't have any issues with the last act either. I thought it was perfectly structured. And then finally, one of my favorite movies of 2017, The Shape of Water, directed by Guillermo del Toro.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, did I have a lot to share on today's podcast. And now, let's get to the remaining movie reviews, starting with Maria.
I will say that after the directors Spencer and Jackie, this was kind of a step down. I will say the movie looks great with the cinematography and costumes, and Angelina Jolie is great in it. However, I didn't think the story was as compelling as those other two movies, and felt like it was just stretching the same message of Maria being a perfectionist and trying to revamp her singing career in spite of her declining health to be extremely repetitive. So to me, not a bad movie, but certainly not one I'd watch again, and I'll give it the seal of accuracy.
I saw this last October at the Chicago Film Festival, and this is one of those movies where I liked it, but I had to watch it a second time to see if I really love this one. And I agree with Søren. It's a bit of a step down from Spencer and Jackie, but mainly because there were some pacing issues in the second and third act, and despite its well written dialogue, I wish Stephen Knight's screenplay could have explored more with its themes involving isolation, legacy, and what was real and what was fantasy. But despite that, it was still a really good movie. The story felt engaging. It's well directed by Pablo Larraín. The acting was terrific, especially from Angelina Jolie, who absolutely delivers one of the year's best performances as Maria Callas. Seriously, what a performance she gave out. And the fact that she spent 7 hours of training, of opera singing training to prepare herself for the role, that's incredible. And on top of the film having an excellent soundtrack, fantastic cinematography, great editing, terrific production values and costume design, it also had a heartbreaking yet I also found the ending to be heartbreaking yet powerful. And overall, despite this being the weakest of the three, I still, despite this being the weakest of the iconic women trilogy, Maria nevertheless features one of the year's most electrifying performances by Angelina Jolie, and it was overall highly engaging and um and it was overall a highly engaging and and oh, I'm trying to it was overall in in great. I'm trying to find some words to describe this. And this was overall an interesting and absorbing experience. So yeah, I give Maria an 8 out of 10 or a B plus. It's a really good movie. Check it out.
Next, we have Flow, and when I saw Robot Dreams and The Wild Robot, I found them both good but a bit lacking for movies people claim to be masterpieces of animation. After watching this movie, though, I got what I was missing from both those films. The story about a cat and a group of animals forced together on a boat during a huge storm. It's compelling thanks to stunning animation, beautiful music, characters who are compelling even without any dialogue spoken, and a story that flows, pun or may not be attended, really well. And like a real pain, doesn't overstay its welcome at not even an hour and a half. I still think Inside Out 2 is my favorite animated film of the year, but this needs to win the Oscar for Best Animated Feature because it was able to do so much with so little. I'm giving Flow an enthusiastic seal of cinema.
I still feel The Wild Robot is the best animated film of 2024 because of that film affected me on a more emotional level. But with that being said, Flow is definitely a runner-up for the best animated film of 2024. This is absolutely one of the most breathtakingly beautiful, exhilarating animated films I've ever seen. From scene one all the way to the end of the film, it blew me away with how the beautiful animation and its stunning visuals were able to tell its story. Flow is such a great tale about fighting against extreme odds that doesn't need dialogue and rather lets the animation, visuals, music, and the sound design do the storytelling. The story had me invested throughout due to how well structured and engaging it felt. It's well directed, and not to mention the screenplay was fantastic, especially with the way it explored its themes on friendship, balance, and unity. And the animation. Oh my god. It is known for being completely rendered on the free and open source software Blender, And yet, I still have this one question. How did they make the animation look this good? Like, my God. Like, this is seriously one of the most beautiful animations I've ever seen in a movie. Like wow. I couldn't take my eyes off of how beautiful it looked. And its stunning visuals added such a nice touch to its beautiful animation. And I know, like, I know on the last show, I made a big mistake saying that animation is a genre when it came to like talking about what my favorite genres are, because now I say this movie proves why animation is cinema and why animation is medium. It's respected as medium. It's got a fantastic musical score, terrific editing, it's tightly paced throughout. It also has some of the best sound design I've heard in the film in 2024. Like, the fact that the sound designer for this movie used actual animal sounds for each character depicted in the film, with the only exception being the capybara, and where, like, he used the sounds of a baby camel instead, since the actual capybara sounds were too high-pitched and unpleasant. That explains very well on why the sound design in Flow is fantastic. Like, wow. And on top of its very satisfying ending, this makes Flow one of the most breathtakingly beautiful and exhilarating animated films I've ever seen, and it's definitely heading on my list for one of the best films of 2024. I went in knowing not much about this one, other than the fact that it's an animated film presented with no dialogue, and boy, it blew me away. Guys, check out Flow as soon as you can if it's at a theater near you. It's one of the year's best films, and of course, I'm definitely going to give Flow an enthusiastic 10 out of 10 or an A+. Well done to everybody involved. Well done.
And now we're going to get from a masterpiece to a complete borefest.
Oh, great, this movie.
Yep, Kraven the Hunter. Considering that this is the last...
Oh, my God.
Considering this is the last movie in the Spidey-less Spider-Man universe, is this as B-movie fun as the Venom movies, or is it another Morbius or Madame Web? It's neither. It's just straight up dull. I'll give All Is Lost director J.C. Chandor for at least making it well shot with some decent fight scenes, and Alan Taylor Johnson is at least trying his best with what he's given. But my main problem is that it's both a bore and a cliched mess. It's yet another guy wants to get back at his father for ruining his childhood kind of movie, and it goes through all the motions.
How many times have we seen that in films before?
That and the pacing is a slog. The flashback near the beginning...
the pacing was awful!
The flashback at the beginning could have easily taken up 5 to 10 minutes, and it takes up an ass-numbingly long 30 minutes. Most of the movie is just people standing around and talking. The CGI isn't Morbius bad, but the effects on Kraven jumping around and the Rhino fighting him at the end look like something out the PS3 tie-in game rather than the movie itself. Russell Crowe is horribly wasted as the father, and the guy who plays the Rhino is just bad too. After this movie,
oh my God! Like, good grief! The way Rhino looked, he seriously looked like if the Thing from Fantastic Four had a brain dead cousin and was painted purple. That's how bad he looked.
After this movie, is there any wonder why rumors have been circulating on Sony finally considering giving the Spider-Man rights to Disney so that they can make all the Tom Holland adventures they want? Because these movies have made it clear that outside the Spider-Verse movies, Sony has no idea what to do with these characters. From reboot after reboot, from villain spinoff after villain spinoff, they do any stupid thing just for the sake of a quick buck. Point is, these movies are done, and I couldn't be any more grateful. Well, aside for that Spider Noir series, but I'm gonna count it as its own thing. Anyways, I'm giving Kraven the Hunter the seal of disapproval.
It's not as bad as Madam Web, but regardless, this is one of the worst movies I've seen this entire year. I mean, it's a bit better than Morbius and Madam Web, but that's not really a positive. So, why don't we get to why I absolutely hated this movie with a burning passion? First off, the story was a contrived mess, especially since it's filled with cliched plot points you've seen in other films before. The ones which Søren mentioned, especially the son getting revenge on his father cliche. How many times have we seen that in movies before? Like, seriously, how many times have we seen that? And second, the screenplay was horrendous. Since it had dialogue that feels like something an AI would write, especially with this one idiotic dialogue involving Calypso, played by Ariana DeBose, which Ariana DeBose. Oh my god. I love Ariana DeBose. She was wonderful in West Side Story. What the hell happened here? I don't know what the hell happened here, but I'm not kidding when I tell you that Calypso has what I consider to be one of the most insanely idiotic lines I've ever heard in a motion picture. If this line doesn't make you feel like an AI wrote this, then I don't know what is. Here's the dialogue. My grandmother died, and then I never saw her again. Let me repeat that again. My grandmother died, and then I never saw her again. Why?
And I let you live here for free, and I don't even charge you rent.
Seriously, that is such idiotic dialogue. If I ever heard one. This is proof that you could easily tell that an AI wrote this. That Sony got some type of chat GPT or some type of AI device to write the screenplay. And second, the characters feel paper thin and one-dimensional. Third, J.C. Chandler's directing was terrible, which is shocking given the fact that he directed one of my favorite movies of 2013, All Is Lost, and then The Most Violent Year, which is one of my favorite films of 2014. So I don't know what the hell happened here. Like this is some sloppy directing if I've ever seen one. Fourth, the acting was absolutely atrocious. I know some people have been praised, including Søren, have been praising Aaron Taylor Johnson as Kraven. I'm sorry, I don't agree with that at all. Especially considering that it looked like he was sleepwalking throughout the film. And everybody else, like Ariana DeBose, Christopher Abbott, and Alessandro Nivola, were also terrible in this movie, mainly with how lifeless and shallow they felt. Russell Crowe was horribly miscast in this movie as Nikolai Kravenov, and that's especially due to his Russian accent he tried to pull in the film, sounding fake as hell. Like no offense, Russell Crowe, but Andy Merrill, who voiced Brack, and one of the space cadets from Aqua Teen Hunger Force can pull a better accent than you. Especially given that one of them given how fantastic his Austrian accent was. I mean, really think about it. Really think about it. Let me show you what I mean. Like if he voiced this, it had a perfect Austrian accent, then he would have pulled up a better Russian accent as Nikolai in Kraven the Hunter. Yeah, that's how bad Russell Crowe was in the film. Oh yeah, this horse shit. I will rant on that when I talk about Kraven again later in my worst of the year list, as well as Madam Web, but oh man, I have a lot to talk about with that. So just hang tight. And on top of its bland musical score, dull cinematography, the editing being all over the place, and the pacing being a sluggish mess, as well as the film with cliches that you've seen in other films before, the action sequences are honestly not that exciting, especially given how there's no real tension in those sequences whatsoever. And the ending tries to set this up for a sequel, which, newsflash, you're not getting, given the fact that this is the final film in the Sony Spider-Man universe, which, thank God. And second, given the fact that it bombed at the box office. So you lose, Sony. And if that wasn't enough, this also has some of the most terrible CGI visual effects I've ever seen in a movie this entire year. Most of them looked very sloppy, and some of them looked unfinished to the point where it felt like I was watching a PS2 video game instead of a theatrically released movie. And the sad thing is, the worst part about this is that this movie cost $110 to $130 million to make. And yet it looked this sloppy and cheap. Especially with how Rhino looked. Like, I'm not kidding what I said earlier. Rhino looks like if the Thing from Fantastic Four had a brain-dead cousin and was painted like gray or purple. You don't believe me? Well, you don't believe me? Well, see for yourself. Look.
He seriously looks like he came out of the PS3 tie-in game, like I said.
Yeah, really. I'll talk about that when we get to a certain film later. So hang tight. Yeah, overall, fuck this movie. Kraven the Hunter is another albatross of a mess in the Sony Spider-Man universe, and this is easily one of the most contrived and boring movies I've seen this entire year. And without a doubt, it is one of the worst movies I've seen in 2024. And without a doubt, Kraven the Hunter is the 9th film in 2024 to receive a 0 out of 10 or an F. Boo! Fuck this movie. Do not see Kraven the Hunter. Even if you like any of the Sony Spider-Man universe movies, this one is not worth your time. Do not see this movie whatsoever. And thank God it bombed at the box office. And Taz, we'll get to that CEO point later on. So hang tight.
Next, we have The Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim. And this is a movie that's been swept under the radar in spite of its popular source material. And seeing this movie, it's not hard to see why. The actors are all solid, the music is great, and it's got its fun action set pieces here and there. However, the animation looks kind of cheap, like it's passable for a streaming service, but it's barely acceptable for theaters. Like, I saw a Demon Train trailer before this movie, and that looked far better. Story is Story is everything you've seen before. The characters are forgettable. Scott's pacing issues and dumb moments just for the sake of the plot. And the fan service isn't the worst, but still unnecessary. So I'll only recommend this movie to hardcore Middle Earth fans, and I'll give this movie the seal of accuracy.
I really didn't like this one. It's not terrible though. There are some things that I did like. Like I gotta disagree with you on the animation because I thought the animation was solid. It's not great, but I thought it was solid. It's got great voice acting, a very good musical score, excellent sound design, and some entertaining battle sequences. However, the story was a cliched and convoluted mess. The screenplay it had a bland screenplay, especially with the characters feeling paper thin and forgettable. The directing was a mild mess. It's clumsily edited. It's 15 minutes too long and suffers through a lot of pacing issues in the second and third act. It's filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, especially when it came to some of the plot aspects of the film. Overall, while it's nicely animated and has some entertaining moments here and there, I'm sorry to say that I found The Lord of the Rings, the War of the Rohirrim to be underwhelmingly dull and forgettable. Not a terrible movie, but not something I'll see myself watching again. 4.5 out of 10 or C. Not a terrible film, but not great either.
Next up, Next up is Wallace and Gromit: Vengeance Most Foul. And after nearly 2 decades since the duo's last adventure, this one proves that Armin's got it again. This movie continues to have the charming characters and fantastic stop motion of the previous films, as well as being bigger and more suspenseful than ever. The music and cinematography are also fantastic as well. Despite a few plot holes here and there, this movie is destined to be yet another staple in the studio's history, as well as one of the best animated films of the year, and I'll give it the seal of approval.
I still gotta see that. I will review that next podcast, so stay tuned. Stay tuned for that. Next movie though. I'm gonna tell a little story here. Because this really hurts. This one really hurts. Back in 2018, I saw How to Talk to Girls at Parties. And not only was that one of the worst movies I saw that year, but I felt it was the worst movie A24 has distributed by far. And I didn't think I would see anything that's worse than How to Talk to Girls at Parties. Well, ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourself because I have seen an A24 film that is worse than How to Talk to Girls at Parties. And I'm not kidding when I tell you that this is worse. This particular film I'm going to talk about is worse than Spring Breakers. It's worse than Men. It's worse than Ditch the Musical. It's worse than How to Talk to Girls at Parties. And it's worse than The Front Room. That film is Y2K. Y2K is the film I'm talking about. So, here's what the film is about. Excuse me. So basically, it's about a group of high school students. It's basically about a group of high school students who attempt to survive when the year 2000 problem causes all technology worldwide to come to life and turn against humanity. Now, it had a pretty good idea. That could have been a really good horror comedy, disaster horror comedy, whatever you want to call it, but that could have been a good idea for a horror comedy. Unfortunately, this is absolutely one of the most Y2K It's one of the most obnoxious, idiotic, and inconsistent movies I have seen this entire year. Now, the only redeeming things I found in the film were that Bill Pope's cinematography was excellent, and it had fantastic, and the way the practical effects were used to make, with how they were able to make the machines come alive, they were fantastic, and they were by far the best things about the whole film. Sadly, that's about the only things I liked in Y2K. The story was a contrived mess, the directing was terrible, and it's shocking given the fact that this is the directorial debut of Kyle Mooney, and as I mentioned before, he was one of the writers of one of my favorite movies of 2017, Brigsby Bear. So I don't know what happened here with this. I'm not kidding. The guy that wrote Brigsby Bear was one of the writers of Brigsby Bear, wrote and directed Y2K. Like, I don't know what happened here. Because not only was it poorly directed, but the screenplay that he and Evan Winter wrote for the film was atrocious. I knew I was in trouble within the first 5 minutes of the film when, I'm not kidding, the father of this kid said this line to his son. He said, "Ever French kiss before? Your mom taught me in college. She was ready to go." Let me repeat that again. His father says this to his son. "Ever French kissed before? Your mom taught me in college. She was ready to go." What father would tell their son that? Like, good grief. Or how about this other idiotic line where one of the characters says, "That's like racism against machines." I can't make shit like this up, guys. These are the actual lines that were written in the film. And on top of atrocious dialogue, the characters felt paper thin and one-dimensional, and the tone was so inconsistent where it can't even decide if it wanted to be a comedy, a disaster, or a horror film. The acting was absolutely terrible. I mean, Jada Martell and poor Rachel Zegler, Julian Dennison, and were all obnoxious in this movie. And Kyle Mooney and Alicia Silverstone were all horribly wasted in this movie since they're not given that much to do in the film. But that's nothing compared to Fred Durst. Fred Durst. I am not kidding when throughout the entire movie, this movie relies so much on nostalgia bait. This movie relies so much on nostalgia bait, saying that, "Hey, remember Limp Bizkit? Remember Fred Durst? Remember the video store? I remember. God, this movie.
Especially referencing movies that haven't even come out in 1999 yet.
Yeah, really. That's another thing. I want to mention. Like, this movie takes place during during the end of 1999 and at the beginning of 2000. And there's a scene where the characters are in a video store, and there are a dozen movies on the shelf of movies that didn't even exist yet, like Nutty Professor to the Clumps, The Family Man, The Art of War, Dr. Dolittle 2, Planet of the Apes, the 2001 remake directed by Tim Burton, by the way, Moulin Rouge, Bad Company, starring Anthony Hopkins and Chris Rock, I think, Mr. Deeds, starring Adam Sandler, Scooby-Doo, the live-action Scooby-Doo movie, 1 Hour Photo, Chicago, Anger Management, and Young Adam. Like, let me give you an like the first 3 I mentioned were released in 2000. The next 3 were released in 2001. The next 5 were released in 2003, and then 2002. Anger Management was released in 2003, and Young Adam was released in early 2004. So you failed. You failed at being nostalgia bait. You failed.
And when you make Madame Wiener's use of toxic when that moment isn't as anachronistic as you know you got a problem.
And oh my god. And the thing is, yeah. And yeah, he should have stayed away from movies. But the thing is, he was in one of my favorite movies of this year, of 2024, which was I Saw the TV Glow. He didn't have a speaking line in the film, and he wasn't in it all that much. But for what he was in, he was actually really good in that film. But in this, good grief. He was just there, he was just there just to be nostalgia bait for the sake of it. And he served no purpose other than the fact that his music could actually kill the machines. He's from Fred Durst is from Limp Bizkit, and Limp Bizkit's music could kill the machines. Isn't that one of the dumbest things you have ever heard in your life? If that isn't one of the dumbest things you would ever hear, then I don't know what is. Oh my god, like... I would rather be watching Mars Attacks over this. I didn't like Mars Attacks, and yet it wasn't this insufferable compared to this. That movie wasn't that insufferable compared to Y2K. That's how bad this is. And on top of that, it's not funny. This movie, it's just not funny. The jokes are beyond idiotic as hell. It's nostalgia bait for the sake of it. And the ending was absolutely idiotic as hell. And you know what? One last thing about that video store scene. That's like if you were to put... I'm not kidding, by the way. That's like if you were to put this and this and this and this in a video store in that scene, despite the fact that all of these movies I mentioned didn't even exist yet. I mean, good goodness. Like, for God's sake, guys. You failed at being nostalgia bait. You failed. You failed at capturing the nostalgia of 1999. You failed. Yeah, overall, this is one of the most... Y2K is one of the most obnoxious, idiotic, and inconsistent movies I've seen this entire this entire year, and it's easily one of the worst movies I've seen in 2024. And this is easily A24's worst movie to date. Now, because of the excellent cinematography and the practical effects, I am only going to give Y2K a 1 out of 10 or a D-. Make no mistake, guys. Even with excellent cinematography and practical effects, this is not worth your time. Stay away from Y2K. Stay away from this one. And A24, never distribute another movie like this ever again. Go back to what you actually love doing, especially considering that I haven't even seen The Brutalist right now, and that's already getting a lot of buzz, awards buzz right now. Like, let me see that movie.
You're in for a treat with that one, Nick. But what isn't a treat is Mufasa the Lion King. When this movie was first announced, the first thing that came to my mind was, why do we need this? Even as someone who still liked the original remake 5 years ago, this seemed extremely unnecessary. But after seeing
this scene was fantastic! One of the best movies of 2024!
Yeah, and after seeing this movie, my first thought and my thoughts on after seeing this movie were, why do we need this?
Seriously, it felt so unnecessary.
I will say the cast tries their best with what they're given, and the songs by Lin-Manuel Miranda weren't great, but they make the experience slightly more tolerable. However, the script is a cliched mess. It seems like this has been the year of friends turned enemies prequels, and this is hands down the worst offender of the bunch. The chemistry between Mufasa and Taka is all you've seen before. Mads Mikkelsen is your typical Disney villain. The cinematography ratings were pretty beautiful. They're kind of off with the close-up on these lions. Speaking of which, can I just say the CGI is a massive downgrade? It's like Barry Jenkins tried to make these characters more expressive after the previous movie got a ton of flack. But the way he did it, every other expression looked like something out of Mad Magazine or something. But there's two specific things that especially got on my nerves. Firstly, the framing device. Why is it in here, other than to remind us that Lion King 2 and Lion King 1.5 exist? It doesn't help either that in spite of Timon and Pumbaa being arguably the best part of the first remake, here they're kind of insufferable. And the last thing that broke this movie was the ending. And I'm going to go into spoilers to
this ending.
So be forewarned if you haven't seen this movie. So
spoil it. Spoil it, dude. Spoil it, dude. Don't let the Disney, don't let the toxic Disney adults tell you otherwise.
So at the climax where Mufasa and his friends have to defend Pirate Rock from the outsiders, out of nowhere, Taka comes in at Mufasa's defense, so he gets this iconic scar on his eye, and he even saves Mufasa from drowning. But out of nowhere, Mufasa decides that because Taka led the outsiders to Pride Rock, he's suddenly not worth forgiving to the point where he can't even say his name. So that's how Scar got his new name, I guess.
Makes no sense whatsoever.
This got on my nerves because not only is this out of character for Mufasa, but it just paints Scar as not evil, just misunderstood. So I know I did a similar thing for the My Little Pony movie a couple years ago, but how about this? Instead of this, how about in the climax, Mufasa is about to deliver the final blow towards the main villain, but Taka comes to fight his brother, and thus he gets the iconic scar from fighting Mufasa instead of the main villain. That
would have been better.
Then when Taka is about to drown, Mufasa would be the one to save Taka after he's crowned king. He lets Taka stay in Pride Rock because he still loves his brother regardless of everything he's done. Then Taka responds by saying something like, "Fine, brother. I'll stay under one condition. From now on, you won't refer to me as Taka. You will refer to me as Scar to remind me of the very thing that tore us apart." See? Isn't that a more satisfying ending than the one we actually got?
Yeah, that would have been much better.
After this movie, the upcoming Lilo and Stitch remake and the upcoming Snow White and the Seven Clever Boys, It's about time Disney just stops with these live-action remakes, because all they become at this point are poor imitators of the classic originals, only made to please the animation is for kids and we can only take live-action seriously crowd.
And you know what's even worse than that? When you have a bunch of toxic Disney adults who act like everything Disney makes is so perfect.
I'm giving Mufasa the Lion King the seal of mediocrity, and I can only hope Eric Jenkins' next movie, which is not including The Fire Inside, which we'll get to in the next podcast, is way better.
I hope so too. And despite how I feel about Chris Stuckman nowadays, I am looking forward to seeing that. But yeah, I'll say this about Mufasa. It's a bit of an improvement over its 2019 CGI remake. Since the visual effects, I have to disagree with you on this, Søren. The visual effects here are a huge improvement this time, and the facial, especially since the way they were able to use the facial expression, the way the visual effects were able to make the lines look more expressive, actually worked. Most of the voice acting was very good, including but not limited to Aaron Pierre as Mufasa. He was brilliant. He was by far one of the best things about the film, and Calvin Harrison Jr. was really good as Taka. And it's got a very good musical score and good cinematography. But other than that, this movie was just boring and pointless. But from its story to its screenplay to its to how clumsily edited it felt, how sluggishly paced it felt, and the songs are so forgettable, including the ones by Lin-Manuel Miranda. I mean, you usually I'll say this. They weren't as bad as Scuttlebutt from The Little Mermaid. The less I say about the Scuttlebutt, the better.
Nowadays, when I hear Scuttlebutt, I can't think of that one scene from Gravity Falls where it's like where they come across this sign that says Scuttlebutt Island, and then Susan's like, "Hey, check it out, Butt Island."
Yeah, really. And yeah, exactly. Grow up, Disney. But yeah, back to the songs here. Hey, Justin Williams, and unfortunately, yes, it's all about making the Benjamins. No. Do not get Eli Roth involved in that. Don't you dare.
I'd rather have Robert Eggers direct that.
Yeah, really. Okay. Back to what I was saying about the songs in Mufasa. They weren't as bad as Scuttlebutt in The Little Mermaid 2023, but they still felt so forgettable. Where they were even more forgettable than the songs in Emilia Perez. That's how forgettable these songs in Mufasa were. I have forgotten every song that was in the film. Usually Lin-Manuel Miranda writes good songs, but not here. But that's nothing compared to... God damn it! Everybody in the chat is going for the jugular tonight.
Honestly, Jose, that would be way more hilarious than the actual Home on the Range movie.
Yeah, really. Oh, I did not ride on cows. It's not true. It's bullshit. I did not ride on cows. I did not. Oh, hi, Roseanne. Oh, wait. I did not. Oh, hi, Belle. Hi, Cal. Hi, Cal. Hi, Cal Bell. Hi, Cal Bell. All right, I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, as forgettable as the songs were, and as idiotic as that ending was, that's nothing compared to Timon and Pumbaa interrupting the story. Now, I know a lot of people. I know there were some people that really enjoyed Billy Eichner and Seth Rogen as Timon and Pumbaa in the 2019 remake. I didn't. To me, Billy Eichner was horribly missed. Now, I do like Billy Eichner, but I do think Billy Eichner is a talented actor, but he was horribly miscast as Timon. And with Seth Rogen as Pumbaa, he was just basically playing. It was just basically. This was the exact same problems I had with some of his roles, including him as voicing Donkey Kong in that Super Mario Brothers movie from 2023. Even though I actually really liked Super Mario Brothers, that Super Mario Brothers 2023 movie. He was just basically playing himself again, like the you, oh my goodness. I know that wasn't my best Seth Rogen impression, but my best Seth Rogen laugh, but you guys get the point. But yeah, they were absolutely yeah. But in Mufasa the Lion King, it's the same thing, but a lot worse. Because whenever they interrupt the story just to provide some shoehorn in jokes, this was literally how I felt. I couldn't help but yell this.
On with it. Yes, get on with it. Get on with it.
And you know what? That's another thing too. This also suffers through one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to movies like this. Characters that come across as being comic reliefs just for the sake of it. And yep, that's exactly the case here. Timon and Pumbaa, the live action Timon and Pumbaa, were just there just to be comic reliefs just for the sake of it. And because of that, they were easily the very worst things about the film, hands down. Yeah, overall, it's a bit of an improvement over the 2019 CG remake, but Mufasa, The Lion King, is nevertheless boring and underwhelming. And because of that, I'm going to give Mufasa, The Lion King a 3 out of 10 or a D+. Again, it's not as bad as the CG remake. It's not as bad as the 2019 film, but regardless, I do not recommend this one at all.
And lean into our next review, I only have one question.
Who posted my nudes on Twitter.com?
Yeah, I just had to make a reference like that.
Oh my god!
You fool! I have 70 alternative accounts! I don't like that, Obama! I pressed on the moon, you idiot!
Oh my god! Guys, if you've seen Snap Q Sonic Adventure 2 dub, you know exactly what he's referencing.
Yeah.
That was good.
Okay. Anyways, Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Who would have thought? Who would have thought 5 years ago
Oh my
when that?
god.
Who would have thought 5 years ago when that first trailer with the terrible Sonic design that it would not only be a stepping stone for better video game movies, but also lead to one of the most successful trilogies in recent memory. This movie maintains the same great attributes as the previous movies, as the visuals are both grand and colorful, the action scenes are thrilling, the performances are all solid, with the stand-ups being Jim Carrey, Ben Schwartz, and Keanu Reeves. But it's also better paced than the last movie, as there's no needless wedding subplot. It's bigger and bolder than ever before, and it goes even darker than you could ever expect. So it's safe to say the filmmakers slipped and learned to give the best Sonic movie yet, as well as one of the best films of the year. I'm giving Sonic 3 the seal of cinema.
Yeah, I love this movie. You hear that, Disney? I love Sonic 3. I love Sonic 3 than your crappy Mufasa the Lion King. How do you like that, Disney? How do you like that, Disney? How do you like that? Everybody in Sonic 3 pissed on the mood and your movie at the box office. But no, seriously, this was an absolute blast. This was one of the best times I've had going to the movies in 2024. Now, my only two minor gripes with the film is that there were a couple of human characters that did feel a bit underdeveloped or were either not really that necessary. And there were admittedly like 10% of the jokes that did fall a bit flat for me, but that's really it. I had an absolute blast watching this movie. I was invested in the story. The story felt engaging. It's very well directed. The screenplay was very good. The acting was great. Jim Carrey nailed it out of the park once again as Dr. Robotnik. And best of all, you know he's that good when he not only plays Dr. Robotnik, but when he plays Gerald Robotnik too. That's how good he is in the film. And James Marsden and Taika Sumter, when they were given the amount of time on screen, they were very good. They were very good. And the voice acting was great too. Ben Schwartz was brilliant as Sonic. But Keanu Reeves, wow, what a performance he gave as Shadow. Like, this is the way he sounded like Shadow was absolutely amazing. The visual effects were fantastic. The soundtrack is fantastic. It's got great cinematography, great editing. It's very well paced throughout. And best of all, 90% of the jokes really hit hard so well. And the action sequences, especially in the third act, oh my god, it really, without spoiling what happens in the third act, oh my god. Oh my god. Like, it really did feel like I was a kid again. It really did feel like I was a kid again. When you can have a film make me feel like a kid again, you made a really good movie. And best of all, the post-credit scene, the mid-credit scene, oh my god! I cannot wait for Sonic 4. After seeing that mid-credit scene. Like, I'm not kidding. I've rarely done this in the movie theater, but oh my god. When that insane mid-credit scene happened, and the fact it was setting up for Sonic 4, I never did this in the movie theater, but I literally stood up and shouted in the movie theater after the mid-credit scene was over, "Bring out Sonic 4!" And I got a few chuckles from everybody in the theater because they were thinking the same thing as well. Now, granted, I'm not gonna probably do something like that again, but but holy shit, that mid-credit scene was insane. Yeah, I absolutely love Sonic the Hedgehog 3. It's the best of the three, and it's one of the most highly entertaining films of 2024. I'm gonna give, and I know I might be in a minority on this, but I really love this movie to the point where it's definitely on my best of 2024 list. And because of that, I'm gonna give Sonic the Hedgehog 3 a 9.5 out of 10 or an A. I really, really like this one. If you like the first two Sonic films, you're going to love this one. Trust me. And now, and yes, I cannot wait for Sonic 4 in 2027. I can't wait. Good job, Jeff Fowler, Paramount, and to everybody involved. Seriously. But now let's talk about this thing that, like, before we move on to the next film, though, let's talk about this thing that, let's talk about this battle that's like been going on, because so recently there was this battle between like Sonic the Hedgehog 3, between like the toxic Disney adults versus the Sonic fans, as well as like Paramount versus Disney, and how Disney tried to sabotage Sonic 3, all because Sonic 3 was number one in the box office for 2 weeks. And there was this argument going on. There was this battle and argument going on between like which movie's better, Sonic 3 or Mufasa. People on this side said Sonic 3, and then the toxic Disney adults on this side said Mufasa. Well, guess what, toxic Disney fans? Sonic 3 is the better film. Sonic 3 is the better film. You cannot convince me otherwise. And Disney, you ought to be ashamed of yourself for trying to sabotage Sonic 3. Like, like this is getting ridiculous at this point. You are nothing but a soulless corporate studio that doesn't care about your fans. You don't care about your fans. You only care about the money you make. Exactly. You can't always be winners, Disney. You gotta let other studios like Paramount do it. Like Disney, you are soulless. You are scum. And the only time I will ever look forward to your movies again is through Pixar. That's it. That's it. And to the Disney shrills that are still attacking Sonic fans just because they don't like what they said about Mufasa, shame on you too. You are the reason why Disney is going downhill. Oh my God! Like, it's like having two grown-ass adults act like kindergartners and are fighting over a fucking crayon. Like, it's ridiculous. Can we just be mature adults for once? And just say, I agree to disagree? It's that really hard to do. This is why I cannot trust Disney at this point. I can't trust Disney. I hate that the toxic Disney fans are also a huge problem. And you know what? If you want to see just how bad these toxic Disney fans are, I'm going to put a link I'm going to put a video link into the description at the end of this podcast. It's that Meat Canyon video called Disney Adults. Trust me, even though it's animated, this is a brilliant deconstruction on just how bad these Disney adults are. And yeah, fuck you, Bob Iger. You need to retire.
I mean, you're still not. I mean, there's still no Bob Saget, but that's like saying, I don't have an analogy for this, but yeah.
You know, that's like saying that's like saying eating a spoiled ice cream. It's better than like taking a shit. It's still bad.
Yeah. And that's like saying Kraven the Hunter is better than Man Web. They're still bad.
Exactly. Let's just move on to the next film before I lose it.
Next up is A Complete Unknown. And James Mangold's spiritual successor to Walk the Line is okay. It's a pretty standard biopic about the rise of Bob Dylan and his various relationships. It's rather slow at times, like there's no reason for this to be nearly 2.5 hours. The movie looks nice with the cinematography and production design. The acting is also good, especially from the likes of Timothy Chalamet and Monica Barbaro. So this was honestly good, but not great. I give it the seal of accuracy.
And I could not disagree with you even more with that, because I thought A Complete Unknown is one of the best movies I've seen in 2024. Now, the only problem I did have with the film is that I wish the film was like 10 more minutes longer, since there were some things involving like Bob Dylan that I wish could have been added. But that's really it. The story felt highly engaging. James Mangold's writing and directing were both terrific, especially with the writing that he and Jay Cox did. The acting was absolutely terrific, especially from Timothy Chalamet, who gives out one of the year's best performances as Bob Dylan. The way he sounded like Bob Dylan and the way he sang, like, my God, who knew he could sing so well? And who knew he could actually play the harmonica so well as well? Like, wow. I was absolutely blown away by that. Edward Norton was also fantastic as Pete Seeger. And although Elle Fanning is not in the film that much, she was absolutely brilliant as Sylvie Russo. The soundtrack was fantastic. The cinematography was terrific. It's very well edited and very well paced throughout. It has terrific production values and costume design. The concert scenes were fantastic. And it had a very satisfying as well. And I love the way it ended as well. But yeah, overall, A Complete Unknown features Timothy Chalamet giving out such an electrifying performance as Bob Dylan, and it is absolutely one of the most highly entertaining and exhilarating music biopics I've ever seen, and it's easily one of the best movies I've seen in 2024. A very enthusiastic 9.5 out of 10 for this one. I absolutely love this movie, and also I want to give a special shout out to one of my good friends, Emma Stratton. It's her birthday today, and she, along with Nate, were I have to thank them for taking me to see A Complete Unknown, because they're the reasons why I really love this movie and why I got into Bob Dylan too. So, Emma, happy birthday. Happy birthday.
And for our final review, I only have one question.
Wait, if that was you on the phone and you on the bus, then who was flickering the lights? Nosferatu!
Yep. At the lighthouse and the Northman blew us away before, this movie proves that Robert Eggers was the perfect director to bring the 20s classic to a new generation.
Folks, this is Nosferatu, and wow, what a movie. What a movie.
His fingerprints are all over this movie, from the sets to the cinematography to the gothic as hell music. It's well paced, delivers the right amount of atmosphere, creepy imagery, and has a killer cast from Nicholas Hoult in the second time he faced off against quote-unquote Dracula. Lily Rose Depp, Willem Dafoe, Simon McBurney, and especially Bill Skarsgård in the second time this year he played a supernatural goth, and this time doesn't act like a tween scientist, sound dark and deep when he's really pretentious and try hard. But we'll get to that when we get to it. So overall, Robert Eggers is now 4 for 4 with this movie, and I'm eager to see what he does next. Nosferatu gets to steal cinema.
Folks, this is the candidate for the most terrifying movie I've seen this decade so far. Like, this is a perfect candidate for the best horror film I've seen this decade so far. Like, wow, what a movie. Nosferatu was a powerful, haunting, terrifying, and chilling experience that had me on the edge of my seat throughout, thanks to the film's eerie atmosphere, as well as it delivering real tension and suspense. The story felt chilling and intriguing. Robert Eggers' directing was fantastic, and so was the screenplay he wrote for the film as well. Mainly in terms of the characters feeling fleshed out and well developed, its well-written dialogue, and the way it explored its themes of obsession, desire, and terror. The acting was absolutely terrific. Bill Skarsgård delivers his best performance yet as Nosferatu. And that's mainly due to how menacing and terrifying he felt. Like, wow. Nicholas Hoult also delivers one of the year's best performances. One of his best performances is Thomas Hutter. Lily Rose Depp absolutely delivers one of the year's most electrifying performances as Ellen Hutter, especially with how you feel the fear that her character faces throughout. And everybody else, from Aaron Taylor-Johnson, Emma Corrin, and Willem Dafoe, also delivered terrific performances as well. It has one of the year's best musical scores due to how eerie and haunting it felt. Fantastic cinematography, terrific editing, excellent pacing, especially with how expertly tight the pacing felt throughout its 134-minute runtime. It also has some of the best production values and costume design I've seen in the movie this entire year, since it captures Germany in 1838 very well, and how you really feel like you're back in that time. The practical effects and makeup are also some of the year's best, especially with how they designed Nosferatu. Seriously, Oscars, this needs the best makeup and hairstyling nomination ASAP. And is the film scary? Oh, hell yes. Hell yeah, it is scary, because not only did the film deliver its eerie and gothic atmosphere, but it also delivered real tension and real suspense to the point where it had me gasping and on the edge of my seat throughout. And the ending and final shot, oh man, wow. I mean, I had a hard time sleeping that night because of how much I'm thinking about, because of how much that last shot burned through my head. And in a good way. Like, I had a hard time sleeping that night. Because I seriously thought Nosferatu was going to do the same thing, even despite him being a fictional character. But yeah. When you could make me have that reaction, like this, and then make me leave like, you made one of the year's best films. Yeah, overall, Nosferatu has now dethroned Long Legs as being the best horror film I've seen in 2024, since this is one of the most powerful, haunting, absorbing, chilling, and terrifying films I've ever seen. And Robert Eggers is now 4 for 4 on this one, and I cannot wait to see what he does next. It's one of the year's 10 best films, and I am definitely going to give Nosferatu a very enthusiastic 10 out of 10 or an A+. Well done, Robert Eggers. Well done.
Now for my pick and dog of the show. Now my pick of the show is among one of the best of 96 and one of the finest films from Milos Forman. I'm of course talking about The People vs. Larry Flint.
That's a great movie.
Story about the infamous publisher who tries to defend his Hustler magazine from the ever-growing backlash is thoroughly compelling thanks to a screenplay by Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski, who you may know for such films as Ed Wood and Man on the Moon. And it also explores the following question.
As well as Big Eyes.
Yeah. And it also explores the following question. Can freedom of speech only go so far? The performances are all top-notch, especially Courtney Love and Woody Harrelson.
Hey, I'm gonna go get myself something to drink. I'll be right back.
All right. It's well-paced, well-shot, and it's bound to give you an uncomfortable feeling, but in the best way imaginable. So that's my pick of the show, The People vs. Larry Flint. As for the dog of the show, since we're going to be talking about some of the worst movies of the year, what better way to coincide with it than to talk about one of the most hated movies in recent memory? So, remember the Lego movie 10 years ago? The movie that should have been a glorified toy commercial but turned out to be something more? Well, I guess Sony learned a wrong lesson from it and thought, hey, they made a movie from a not-so-good content and turned out well, so that means we can make a movie out of literally everything. So they quickly and hastily pooped out this movie, and it's been getting flack from the internet from the very announcement to the trailers to the final release. And I'm sure you can all guess what it is. Yep, it's the Emoji Movie. So this movie tries, keyword being try, to be like the Wreck-It Ralph, except with various apps you can find on your phone, and boy did this fail miserably. Firstly, the story has so many holes. It hinges on the fact that these emojis had to just stand there in place as they're being scanned so that they'll appear in upcoming text. Someone was actually paid to write this.
Oh god, the Emoji Movie.
Not to mention, outside the main character and a few others, all the other characters are all just one joke. The high five emoji is just hand jokes.
Oh my god! And he's voiced by the piece of shit. He's voiced by the piece of shit himself, James Corden.
The shit emoji is just shit jokes. The main villain
and you know what's even more insulting about the shit emoji? He's voiced by Patrick Stewart. He went from one of the best movies of 2017, by playing Charles Xavier one last time in Logan, to this.
Yeah. The main villain, Smiler, is complete cringe.
Worst animated movie villain ever.
The product placement is just abysmal, to the point where there's actual scenes dedicated on how to play the Candy Crush and Just Dance games, as well as the Twitter bird Ex Machina. Not to mention, the kid who using this phone is a complete loser. I mean, he has a crush on this girl, and he has
such a fucking pussy.
I mean, he has
That's what he is.
He has a crush on this girl and even has her phone number, and he doesn't muster up the courage to ask her out. All he does is text her an emoji, and that apparently gets her into him at the end of the movie.
Dude, grow some fucking balls and ask the girl out!
Guys, this is the wrong guy for relationship advice. If you really have a crush on someone and want to ask her out, get off your ass and ask her face to face.
Just do it!
Don't sit there.
Just do it!
So, despite a decent animation, this was a complete facepalm of a movie. When the best part about this movie is the Hotel Transylvania short this was attached to, you know you have a problem. But I'll give it this. At least this movie didn't negate the first sub-film with a feature-length WWE commercial.
Thank God I stayed away from that. Hold on, let me find that clip. That's what I say to that pussy that refuses to like grow some balls and ask the girl out. And he really, the director of the film, Tony Leondas, he really thought he was being cute by saying that this is the Toy Story of this generation. Ha! Like, because not only is that the complete opposite, but you ripped off the Lego Movie, you ripped off Wreck-It Ralph, and you especially ripped off Inside Out. Like, how unoriginal and lazy are you? Yeah, let's just be thankful they redeemed themselves a year later with that. And you know what? I remember like back in 2017, I said 50 Shades Darker was the worst film of 2017. Well, you know what? I officially owe that film an apology. Because the Emoji Movie makes the 50 Shades trilogy look like the Godfather trilogy in comparison. It's that bad. Folks, there was a reason why this and Dirty Grandpa were two of the worst movies I saw from the last decade. Because of its terrible message that's terrible for kids of any generation, and the amount of product placement shoved in your face. And it shows Sony's true colors at this point. It was bad enough with the leaks, but with this one, this showed Sony at having their true colors. Yeah, that's why the Emoji Movie. Honestly, the Emoji Movie was my pick for the worst film of 2017, and that's why it's Søren's dog of the show. Fuck this movie. Are you still there, Søren?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. All right. And unfortunately, my anger is not done yet because it's that time, guys. You've been waiting almost 90 minutes for this. We're gonna get to talking about the worst movies that Søren and I saw in 2024. Now, keep in mind of this too. These are just our personal opinions for what we feel are the worst films that we saw in 2024. If you disagree with any of the picks that are on this list, that's totally all right. Please remember that you're always welcome to comment down below and let us know what the worst movies you saw that year in 2020 film were. Also, keep in mind as well, Søren and I did not see any of the films that people have on their worst of list. I didn't see Miller's Girl. I didn't see Uglies. I didn't see Atlas. Nor did I even have the patience. The patience to sit through Night Swim. So any of those movies you have on the worst of list, they're not on our list. Either because we didn't have time to see them or we just chose not to. So that's why they won't be on the list. But without further delay, before we talk about our 15 of the worst movies that we saw in 2024, we're going to talk about some dishonorable mentions.
Firstly, even though this is my guilty pleasure of the year, I still have to mention it because objectively it's not a very good movie. M. Night Shyamalan's Trap. A movie where the killer gets away with anything, even to the point of walking in a room with SWAT officers and not even being recognized once. Next up, we have Argyle, which should have been a fun mix of The Lost City and Kingsman, but it just got cut up its own ass by throwing in all these twists and turns, all while throwing $200 million right down the shitter. Next one, The Sea of the Sacred Fig. It's one thing to stick it to the Iranian government who tried to censor and imprison its filmmakers for their craft, but the problem is it's too busy with stretching its message across 3 fucking hours that it forgets to tell an interesting story. And I'll get to it in the next podcast. Next up, Robert Zemeckis is Here, a movie that would have been a neat concept for a 10-minute short film, but stretched to 2 boring hours. Next, we have the Diet Inglourious Basterds itself, the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Next, we have the 2 latest installments to franchises that have more than overstayed their welcome. Godzilla X Kong The New Empire and Bad Boys Ride or Die. Next up, Megamind vs. the Doom Syndicate. You know how all Megamind had to do to save the world is use that big brain of his and use the dehydration gun on the villains? That's okay, because neither did the filmmakers. Next, we have...
So stupid!
Next, we have not 1 but 2 overrated and boring movies where nothing happens, The Dead Don't Hurt, and small things like these. Next up, you want to talk about protagonists making the most nonsensical decisions for the sake of the plot? Well, look no further than A Quiet Place Day 1, where a hero gets such a craving for a slice of pizza that when Manhattan gets swarmed by these violent creatures, instead of getting on one of the boats to safety, she instead decides to stay to fulfill her hunger, thus endangering the lives of not just her own cat, but dozens of innocent bystanders along the way. Next up, Horizon and American Saga Chapter 1, a movie that turned out to be such an embarrassing bomb that Warner Bros. Pulled the next movie off the release schedule at the last minute and still hasn't set a release date despite premiering in Venice back in September. Next, we have the cinematic universe that graduated from Pay It Forward wannabe to Schindler's List wannabe that got delayed 2 entire years only for it to bomb like a nuclear blast, Whitebird, which is the first and not last landscape bomb you'll be seen on this list. Next up is a 3-way tie between 3 musical films, the Mean Girls reboot, Emilia Perez, and Moana 2. This truly was the year for polarizing musicals, and these movies prove why. Next up, Bob Marley, One Love.
And you know what, Søren, to be honest, I'd rather watch the Mean Girls remake than sit through Emilia Perez and Moana 2 ever again.
Next up, Bob Marley, One Love. The best thing about it is seeing it take a dump all over Mad Web in the same opening weekend, but otherwise it's not a very good movie. Next up, Mufasa the Lion King, which we just talked about. Next one, My Spy the Eternal City. The first one was actually kind of decent, but this sequel was just not it. And then, finally, last and least, we have the August Wilson adaptation that just didn't know what it wanted to be, The Piano Lesson.
Alright, so I have one special mention to the most overrated film of the year, Emilia Perez. Emilia Perez had great acting, especially from Zoe Saldana and Carla Sofia Gascon, and excellent cinematography, directing a musical score. But here's one glaring issue I have with the film, and why I chose this as the most overrated film of 2024. Why the fuck did it need to be a musical? I get it. It's loosely based on the director's opera libretto, but come on. The story alone doesn't warrant this as being a musical. And to make matters worse, even when the movie tries to throw in a character who becomes a transgender later on in the film, it had absolutely nothing to say about it whatsoever. And I'm not kidding. This movie is also transphobic with the way it presents its outdated tropes, unlike a character who's a transgender. Like, guys, transgender people are people too. Like, when will you ever learn?
You know, it's bad that even members of the LGBT community don't like this movie.
Exactly. And it also had nothing to say involving its main theme of identity, as well as its social commentary on violence whatsoever. And minus El Mal, the rest of the songs were very forgettable. Yeah, Emilia Perez is the most overrated film of 2024. And the fact it won Best Picture, Musical, or Comedy over Anora, over A Real Pain, over Wicked, over The Substance, and over Challengers, that is a crime. That is a crime against humanity.
I'd honestly rather take them choosing Bohemian Rhapsody as the best drama over this.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that is why it is the most overrated film I've seen in 2024. And I originally gave it a 4.5 out of 10 or C, but now I'm lowering it down to a 4 out of 10 or a C minus. It is easily the most overrated film I've seen in 2024. And now for the dishonorable mentions. Bob Marley, One Love, Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, Despicable Me 4, Illumination. Just stop with these Despicable Me movies. I understand they're making you money, but we don't want to see any more of these corn pop rejects. Mufasa the Lion King, which we already talked about, Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, Robert Zemeckis is Here, Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis. Francis Ford Coppola, what the hell happened? And lastly, how could you sell your own wine company just to make this movie? How could you sell your own wine company?
And especially, how could you hang out with these underage extras on set?
Inexcusable. But then again, he also defended a child predator named Victor Salva. Yeah, what does that tell you? Next up, I love the Coen brothers, but Ethan Coen made the worst movie involving the Coens so far. Drive Away Dolls, Boy Kills World, The Front Room, one of two A24 films that are on the list, and then we have two films from both the Shamalama Ding Dongs. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. Anyway, the next two are from the Shamalama Ding Dongs. One is M. Night Shamalama Ding Dong's Trap, and then the other one is from Ashana Night Shamalama Ding Dong, The Watchers.
I'm not seeing the word here.
Yeah, most underrated film of the year, huh?
Nah, that one will go to a movie that is going to be in your top 15.
Mm-hmm. Next up, the worst animated film of the year, the Garfield movie. And then next up, one of the worst music biopics I've ever seen, Back to Black, aka How to Portray Amy Winehouse like an asshole, like a drunk asshole. Seriously, what the fuck? And this last one, I originally gave a 0 out of 10 to, but I decided, you know what? There's a few good performances, and it's well shot to the point where it's a 2 out of 10. And that film is Pool Man, directed by Chris Pine. Yeah, I originally gave it a 0 out of 10, if you guys remember, but then I realized, you know what? There were a couple of good performances, and it's well shot too, so it's a 2 out of 10. But regardless, it's not worth your time. Just stay away from Pool Man. And now, let's get to the list.
15. My number 15. Hey, Zack Snyder, how are you doing? Oh, trying and failing to launch the next great franchise with Netflix and excusing it with a director's cut that doesn't even improve on it? Oh, okay. Well, that's what we got with Rebel Moon Part 2. All these two movies have done is remind me of movies like Star Wars and Seven Samurai, all while bombarding me with slow motion and exposition up the wazoo, boring characters, lifeless CGI, and an ending that just teases the next movie, which isn't going to happen because this movie was so forgotten. Once again, Zach, stop trying to be the next Peter Jackson because you're not. All these movies have been doing is filling up a spot on my worst list. More specifically,
and here's another thing too. Oh, that version you saw on Netflix. That's the tech demo cut of the film. Why didn't you release your own cut of the film, Zack Snyder? What were you thinking?
So yeah, that's why it's my number 15, Rebel Moon Part 2.
Number 15. Starting with my number 15 spot, it's the most disappointing film I've seen in 2024. Joker Filet à Deux, or as I like to call it, Joker for Filet à Doo-Doo. Yeah, you better. Hold on a second. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, that's right. You better run, boy. You better run, boy. Yeah, this is absolutely. This was a huge disappointment. This really hurts to put on. This really hurts to put this on the list. This was my third most anticipated film for the rest of 2024, and my God, was it a huge disappointment. As I stated before, the first Joker film was a powerful experience. It was fine as it is as a standalone film. The sequel basically destroyed everything I loved about the first Joker movie and completely made it into nothing but a fucking joke. The only reason this is at number 15 instead of in the top 10 is because Joaquin Phoenix once again steals the entire show as Arthur Fleck / the Joker, and Brendan Gleeson was very good in the film as well, and it had excellent cinematography and production design, but that's it. Everything else was a fucking train wreck. Not only do you have Lady Gaga horribly underutilized as Lee, but the musical numbers felt shoehorned in and out of place. Even despite good choreography, what makes the musical numbers feel underwhelming as hell is how not only is it's not only how it's a jukebox musical, but how they serve no purpose whatsoever other than, oh, this is Arthur's fucked up fantasy you're seeing. Oh, but let's not forget the biggest reason why this is on the list. The fucking ending. Seriously, what the fuck was Todd Phillips thinking with that ending? Seriously, by ending the movie with the young inmate stabbing Arthur to death after he tells a joke, you not only insulted the audience's intelligence, but also people who love the first Joker film, and that's deplorable. This is the biggest reason why this is at number 15. I mean, the whole film was bad, but not top 15 worst films of the year worthy. But that ending left such a very bad taste in my mouth that it had to be on here in the top 15 worst. Overall, despite Joaquin Phoenix's powerhouse performance, Joker Filet à Doo-Doo is unfortunately a huge step down from the first Joker film, since it was nothing but an incompetent and convoluted mess. And that's why it is number 15 on my list and the most disappointing film of 2024. Shame on you, Todd Phillips. Shame on you.
Number 14 is another movie we just talked about that sucked ass, Kraven the Hunter. Like I said, it's not nearly as bad as something like Morbius or Man Web, but my biggest problem with this movie is how dull it is. See, a story about a protagonist dealing with his estranged father, nothing really happens, the CGI is a joke, and the fact that they ended this spiteless Spider-Man universe on this note is just perfect. This whole thing ended not with a bang, but with a whimper, which is exactly the ending it deserves. So my number 14 is Kraven the Hunter.
My number 4, and you know what, speaking of Sony Spider-Man Universe movies, we're going to start off with my first one at number 14, and that is Venom: The Last Dance. I'll say this. This wasn't as bad as the first Venom movie, but man, it was really tough sitting through this film. Despite Tom Hardy once again giving out a good performance as Eddie Brock and the film having solid cinematography, as well as admittedly, the final battle being entertaining. This, not only do I find Venom: The Last Dance to be one of the worst conclusions to a trilogy I've ever seen, but it's also one of the most convoluted, contrived, idiotic, and reprehensible films I've seen this entire year. What angers me about this one is that they basically doubled down on the criticisms I had with the first 2 Venom films and made it just as bad, if not worse. Especially with the odd couple-esque comedy between Eddie and Venom, where Venom never shuts the fuck up. And the way they decided to end this movie with Venom Venom is sacrificing himself, and he's dying for our sins. Feel bad for him. I'm gonna play this clip from Wayne's World. To describe that ending, like, shit. Like, I'm not kidding about the way it ended.
I bet you reacted to Venom's death similar to He Who Shall Not Be Named reacted to James Bond's death.
Yeah, except unlike James Bond, where his death felt emotional, this didn't. Oh, Venom is sacrificing himself, and he's dying for our sins. Feel bad for him.
Mental? We broke up. It's me.
Hold on.
You mental?
Sorry. Oh, Venom is sacrificing himself. He's dying for our sins. Pray for him.
I lost you 2 months ago. Are you mental? We broke up. Get the net.
Are you mental? Get the net. Nice try, movie, but I am not falling for that whatsoever. He got what was coming to him. Also, I love how the movie teased the audiences in the trailer by saying that Canal was going to play a big part as the villain since he's the creator of the symbiotes. When newsflash, he's barely in the movie at all. And that ending montage where Eddie reflects on the good times he had with Venom, give me a break. Yeah, that's why Venom: The Last Dance is number 14 on the list. And you know what the sad thing is? This isn't the only Sony Spider-Man Universe movie on the list. Oh no, there's 2 more I'm gonna talk about later on when we get to them, but not right now. Right now, we have to talk about our 13th worst.
Number 13. You know, between 2008 and 2019, you could have easily had the time to let Guillermo del Toro and Ron Perlman make their 3rd Hellboy movie. Instead, you just let the rights collect dust on the shelf until they've both lost interest, so you have no choice but to reboot it just for the hell of it. The 2019 reboot was bad, but Hellboy the Crooked Man isn't much better either. This movie tries to go for something different and go for a more slow-burn horror film, but it just doesn't work. The CGI looks like a sci-fi original. Hellboy looks like a regular guy with cheap horns on his head. It's got all the cliches of an A24 horror film, and this movie is so forgettable that the studio forgot to promote it, so they had to dump it on streaming just to get it released. After this movie, it'll take a miracle for the Hellboy brand to be relevant again.
Fail.
I'm not saying you have to make Ron Perlman's Hellboy 3, but I'm just asking for a good movie with Hellboy. Until then, Hellboy the Crooked Man is my number 13.
As for my number 13 is one of the worst action movies I've ever seen. Hold on a second. Okay. My number 13 is one of the worst action movies I've ever seen, The Killer's Game. The Killer's Game is absolutely one of the most boring action movies I've ever seen. Even despite Dave Bautista and Sofia Boutella giving out good performances and the film having decent cinematography, this was nothing more than a chore to sit through. The screenplay was absolutely atrocious, especially since the dialogue felt like something that either a ChatGPT or a different kind of AI created. You also waste Ben Kingsley in the film since he's not given that much to do, and also horribly miscast Terry Crews as Love Doll. Seriously, who names their character that? That's fucking stupid. Not to mention that the choppy editing was one of the biggest reasons why I didn't find the action sequences in the film to be all that exciting. But that's not all. Do you want to know another thing? Do you want to know another thing that ruined the action sequences for me besides the terrible editing? The decision to use CGI blood. Like, you guys seriously couldn't use practical effects or fake blood to make the actors look like they're really bleeding, so you decided to cop out and CGI the blood instead? Are you fucking kidding me? Especially when the CGI blood in that film looks like something out of a freaking YouTube video. Like, guys, what the hell? Yeah, overall, The Killer's Game is one of the most convoluted, boring, and meandering action movies I've ever seen, and that is why it's number 13 on my list.
My number 12. After the Coen brothers broke up, Joel seems to be doing well with his Macbeth movie, but the same can't be said for his brother Ethan with Drive-Away Dolls. Now, does this showcase the talent and chemistry between Margaret Qualley and Geraldine V? Sure. Does it work as an overall movie? Well, if you like one-note jokes involving dildo obsession, adding in transitions into a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, and filmed over long even at not even 90 minutes, then I guess it works for you. As for me, though, I can only hope this is a fluke for Ethan, and this was not a way to thrive without his brother. And that's why Drive-Away Dolls is my number 12.
Number 12 on my list. My number 12 is one of the most horribly misguided and tone-deaf movies I've seen this entire year. The American Society of Magical Naggers. Yeah. This movie had one job. One fucking job. To satirize the magical black people trope. But what does the director Kobe Libby do with that? Absolutely nothing. Like, for fuck's sake, you don't make a satire about that trope and then do nothing with it by being a different genre. And aside from terrible jokes, the effects looking like something out of a made-for-TV movie, and Justice Smith being absolutely insufferable as Aaron. It also has one of the worst endings I've ever seen in a movie. And that is the soul, and that involves the gag of Soul Swag being translated to Society of Supported Wives and Girlfriends.
Are you mental? We broke up. Get the net.
Like, you expect me to believe that you are teasing a sequel for this, even despite the fact that it's not going to happen, given how much the film bombed hard at the box office? Get the fuck out of here with that shit. Yeah, overall, the American Society, the only reason why this is only at number 12 is because David Alan Grier gives out a very good performance, and it's very well shot too. Otherwise, the American Society of Magical Naggers is a cynical, frustratingly misguided, and insulting satire that does nothing with its topic it's satirizing whatsoever because of how it's too timid to go all the way with it. And that's why it is number 12 on my list. Fuck this movie.
As for my number 11, I got a riddle for you. What do you get when the classic Gothic swan song from Brandon Lee gets bastardized in favor of trying to follow the latest trends with
oh my god, this movie.
effort? Well, you get The Crow 2024. The compelling
I'll
characters...
talk about that later on my list, because, boy, I have a lot to talk about.
The compelling characters of the original are replaced by teenagers who act tortured for the sake of attention. Nothing happens throughout 75% of this movie. It wraps up the opera house climax of The Godfather 3, and it ultimately led to an ending that replaced the satisfying conclusion of the original in favor of sequel baiting. Honestly, it's no wonder why Lionsgate forgot they even made this movie until a couple months before its release, so they just decided to release it anyway for shits and giggles. Hence, it's my number 11.
Number 11, I already reviewed this movie earlier, so I'm going to keep it brief. But number 11 is the worst A24 movie ever made. Y2K. Boy, did I hate this one. Man, did I really hate this one. Y2K was one of those movies that annoyed me to no end with how incredibly unfunny it felt throughout. Especially when most of the jokes are basically a bunch of remember the video store? Remember Limp Bizkit? Remember Fred Durst? I remember that. Which got old and stale real quick. And
yeah,
worst of all,
remember when Rachel Zegler looked like a promising actress?
Yeah, really. And it's disappointing given the fact that the Steven Spielberg remake of West Side Story she was in was fantastic. What the hell happened? And worst of all, when the movie is not only relying so much on nostalgia bait for the sake of it, it also has one of the biggest blunders I already mentioned the biggest blunders involving like the movie setting taking place in 1999, at the end of 1999 and at the beginning of 2000. Yet in the scene where the main characters are at a video store, there were a dozen of movies on VHS on the shelf that didn't even exist yet, like Nutty Professor 2, The Clumps, The Family Man, The Art of War, Dr. Dolittle 2, the 2001 remake of Planet of the Apes, Moulin Rouge, Bad Company, the Mr. Deeds remake starring Adam Sandler, the live-action Scooby-Doo movie, 1 Hour Photo, the Academy Award-winning Chicago, Anger Management, and Young Adam. But when it's not relying too much on nostalgia bait for the sake of it, it's also incredibly unfunny. Like, all the jokes fall very flat on their faces. It's like when it's not nostalgia bait for the sake of it, and when it's not funny, it's also really inconsistent and idiotic. Like you expect me to believe that in order to stop the machines from attacking the humans, all of a sudden they rely on Fred Durst of Limp Bizkit to destroy the machines with his music? You know what? Take it away, Billy Madison. You know what? I'm going to play this clip from Billy Madison to describe my feelings towards this.
Mr. Madison, what you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I've ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you.
Yeah, really. I couldn't have said it better myself.
I mean, a simple wrong would have been just fine, but okay.
The acting from everybody involved was terrible, and I cannot stand a fucking screenplay, especially with it having atrocious dialogue like ever French kiss before. Your mom taught me in college. She was ready to go. Or that's like racism against machines. And it didn't help, and it also didn't help that it had characters that felt paper thin and one-dimensional, and the tone being so inconsistent to the point where I can't even decide if I wanted to be a comedy, a disaster, or a horror film. The only redeeming themes I found in the film were the practical effects and Bill Pope's cinematography. That's it. And it's honestly shocking to me that this was distributed by A24 Ball Studios, because they have made some great movies over the years, like The Spectacular Now, Under the Skin, Ex Machina, Room, The Witch, A Ghost Story, Good Time, Lady Bird, The Disaster Artist, First Reformed, Hereditary, 8th Grade, The Farewell, The Lighthouse, Uncut Gems, First Cow, Minari, Saint Maud, The Green Knight, Come On, Pearl and X, Marcel the Show with Shoes On, The Whale, After Sun, Showing Up, You Hurt My Feelings, Past Lives, Talk to Me, Priscilla, Dream Scenario, The Iron Claw, and The Zone of Interest. And the fact that they are the same studio that not only made some great movies this year, like Love Lies Bleeding, Civil War, I Saw the TV Glow, Sing Sing, A Different Man, and Heretic. But it's also the fact that they made two movies that are in my favorite movies of all time list. Moonlight and Everything Everywhere All at Once. But man, I never thought I would really hate an A24 film more than How to Talk to Girls at Parties. Well, guess what? This topped it. Yeah, that's why Y2K is now the worst movie I've seen. The worst A24 movie I've seen so far. It is absolutely one of the most obnoxious, idiotic, and inconsistent movies I've seen this entire year, and that is why it is number 11 on the list. Fuck this movie.
Number 10 is one of two movies this year that I can say most encapsulates everything wrong with the film industry today. And first up is Borderlands. Like I said in my own video, the past few years have given us a fair share of where we see video game adaptations from the Sonic movies to the Castlevania show to the Arcane series. But I guess Eli Roth and Ari Rod forgot about that when they greenlit this disaster. This is everything that people who hate the MCU think the MCU is. With its annoying characters, a visual flair that tries to be thrilling and colorful when all they are cheap looking and boring, frantic pacing, and undermining the source material in favor of being the next Guardian of the Galaxy, is there any wonder why this movie bombed like a nuclear blast? After this movie, it's gonna take a fucking miracle for the director, producers, and everyone in between to bounce back, as this might as well be this generation's Cutthroat Island, which is why Borderlands is my number 10.
My number 10 worst. Oh boy, now we're in the top 10. Next up at number 10 is Matthew Vaughn's worst movie to date, Argyle. Matthew Vaughn, what the hell happened to you? You have made some great movies. You have made some really good movies in the past, like Layer Cake, X-Men First Class, and Kingsman: The Secret Service. How did you make a movie that's even worse than The Kingsman? Like, how? Argyle is one of those movies where its concept gets stranded in a movie that clearly has no idea what it wants to be when it comes to its storytelling and the type of genre it tries to go for. For that, not only does it become nothing more than an exercise in pointlessness, but also a missed opportunity for everyone involved, as well as a complete waste of time. The only redeeming things in the film were that Bryce Dallas Howard and Sam Rockwell both gave out some very good performances, and they had some really good chemistry in the film, and it had very good cinematography as well. But that's unfortunately it. The story was a convoluted mess since it clearly had no idea what it wanted to be. The screenplay was atrocious due to its dialogue being filled with terrible one-liners, characters that feel paper thin and underutilized, and the tone being so all over the place where it can't decide whether it wanted to be a spy action film, or a comedy movie. And as I stated before in the past, I don't have a problem with movies combining different types of genres. Let me rephrase that again. As I stated before in the past, I don't have a problem with movies combining different types of genres together into one movie, but it needs to make sense and feel well balanced. The tone in Argyle, on the other hand, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. The rest of the acting, while not terrible, wasn't that great, especially since Bryan Cranston, Catherine O'Hara, Ariana DeBose, John Cena, and Samuel L. Jackson are all horribly wasted in this movie since they're not given that much to do, especially Henry Cavill. What makes this so misleading is that in the trailer, they advertised that Henry Cavill was going to play a big part in the film as Argyle, yet he's only in 40 to 45 minutes of the film. Seriously, if that isn't misleading enough, then I don't know what is. Not to mention that the film did not need to be 140 minutes long, especially since there were some things in it that dragged on and on and on and on to the point where not only did they serve no purpose to the story, but it's to the point where I felt they should have shaved 30 minutes of it down. And it also suffers through a lot of pacing issues here and there as a result of this. And not only were the action sequences a lackluster mess, especially with how poorly edited they felt, but the comedy also felt very flat as it tries to poke fun of the spy cliches. But in reality, it's one of those situations where you can't help but think that the real joke of the film is that the film ends up becoming a cliche that it's mocking, especially since you've seen all of this in better spy action films before. But the thing that really destroyed the movie for me, are the goddamn twists. I mean, with the first two twists, I at least saw what they were trying to do. But by the time the movie threw in more twists, it lost me to the point where it made me think that they were trying way too hard to make the twist come off as being subversive for the sake of it. And at that point, I was just begging for it to be over. Yeah, overall, Argyle is easily Matthew Vaughn's worst movie he's done so far, and one of the most contrived, meandering, convoluted, and inconsistent movies I've seen this entire year, and that's why it is my number 10. Matthew Vaughn, please do better next time. Please.
Now, you might be seeing a trend from my top 10 because this has not been a good year for kids' movies. For every film like Inside Out 2 or The Wild Robot, there's been something like my number 9, the Garfield movie.
Oh, God.
This movie just tosses decades of material for the Garfield character in favor of yet another movie about an estranged father. Yep, first Kraven the Hunter and now this. Outside of Nicholas Hoult and Harvey Guillén, all the actors are just there for a quick paycheck. Chris Pratt's just playing Chris Pratt. Samuel L. Jackson's just playing himself. Hannah Williams is wasted as the main villain. The animation's cheap as hell, the product placement is abysmal, and it just left an empty hole in my heart. Like I said before, those live-action movies may have felt like Mondays, but this isn't even worth that mantra. All it deserves is a number 9 spot on my list.
Oh, and before I talk about my number 9, thank you, Taz, for pointing this out. I forgot to mention that the effects, the visual effects, the CGI effects in Argyle look horrendous. Like, good grief! This movie cost $200 million to make. $200 million, and yet, if the visual effects in this movie look so sloppy, they look like something out of a PS3 game. That's how bad they looked. Anyway, moving on to my number 9. And good thing you mentioned the genre family, Søren, because my number 9 is one of the worst family. My number 9 wins the award for being the worst family movie I've seen in 2024. Harold and the Purple Crayon.
I'll get to that later.
Yep, you knew this was going to be on the list. As one of the former Spill.com, members said it best, it's ass-tastic. Even despite the animation in the opening and at the end being the only redeeming thing in the film, it still didn't help Harold and the Purple Crayon from being one of the most contrived, inept, idiotic, and predictable films I've seen this entire year. Zachary Levi plays the same Shazam-like character over and over and over again, which got on my nerves real quick, and Luro Halhouri and Tanya Reynolds were both insufferable as Moose and Porcupine, especially when they turn into humans as they go into the real world for no fucking reason. Especially with how Porcupine was designed. Like look at this. Look at this. Like, what? Like, what? Somebody at Sony should have looked at that and said, yeah, Porcupine's human design doesn't make any sense. But that's not the only reason why this absolutely sucked. The CGI effects of this movie were absolutely abysmal, especially since not only were most of them sloppy as hell, but some of them looked unfinished. And not to mention, I did not laugh once throughout the entire film, since all the jokes felt juvenile as hell, while some of them dragged on and on and on just to pad out the runtime. And the main theme and message involving imagination felt poorly executed. Overall, Harold and the Purple Crayon earns the dishonor as being the worst family movie I've seen in 2024 due to how contrived and idiotic it felt, and that's why it is number 9 on the list.
Number 8 is another Dave Bautista action rom, this time being The Killer's Game. It's one thing that this is another generic Hitman movie. It's even worse than when you actually see the movie and notice all these great actors being wasted here. Then the action is nonsense with all these quick cuts and shaky cam. This is by far Lionsgate's worst movie this year, and after everything they've been put through this past few months, we can only hope 2025 is better for them. But for now, The Killer's Game is my number 8.
And you know what? One last thing about Harold and the Purple Crayon. It doesn't matter if your movie is live action or animated. If a movie is bad, there's a good reason for that. Do not shove in that, oh, it's just a kids movie. You're being way too harsh on it. Excuse. Because then you're just alienating your own audience and deflecting the criticism. Seriously, this needs to stop. Anyway. Oh boy, now we're on to the zeros. The zeros of 2024. At number 8, I have a tie. Yep, I have a tie. And it's a tie between two PG-13 horror films that, on paper, had interesting concept, but terrible execution. Number 8 is a tie between Imaginary by Blumhouse and Tarot. Both Imaginary and Tarot had interesting concepts, but awful execution. With Imaginary, it had an interesting concept involving an imaginary friend turning evil. Unfortunately, the concept quickly got lost in a sea of horror cliches that you've seen 1,000 times before in other horror films. And with Tarot, it had an interesting concept involving a tarot deck killing people, but like Imaginary, it immediately got floundered thanks to the film's sea of horror cliches that again, you've seen in other films before, as well as the characters being a bunch of fucking idiots. Not only did both Imaginary and Terrell have a lackluster story, an atrocious screenplay, abysmal directing, terrible acting from everybody involved, bland musical score and cinematography, sloppy editing, sluggish pacing, and the goddamn jump scares, which I will mention in my number 7 spot. But even worse, in Imaginary, you have Betty Buckley's character be there just to spout out nonsensical exposition dumps just to make the audience look stupid, which, for God's sake, we already know what's going on screen. You don't need to provide exposition dumps. We already know what's going on, guys. Not to mention the third act in Imaginary. It's a complete ripoff. It's a complete ripoff of one of my all-time favorite horror movies, Poltergeist. I know Jeff Wadlow said that he was inspired. That film inspired him to make Imaginary. But there's a difference between being inspired by it and just ripping it off. And Imaginary fell into the latter of ripping Poltergeist off. Even some of the practical effects used in Imaginary felt horribly utilized, especially how the creature was designed. Like just look at this fucking thing. Is that supposed to be scary? You expect me to believe that the creature that looks like an American Werewolf in Paris reject is scary? Are you shitting me? Oh, goodness. But I'm not done just yet. With Tarot, you also have one of the most idiotic endings I've ever seen in my life. Like, you expect me to believe that all this time, Paxton, played by Jacob Batalon, was alive this whole time, even though early on in the film, he was getting devoured in the elevator by the fool, and the reason was because his roommate. And the reason was because his roommate. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding what I said. It was after his roommate opened the elevator door at the last second, which made the fool disappear. What? Yeah, overall, that's why Imaginary and Terrell are both tied at number 8. They're both contrived, idiotic, cliched, and boring. But as much as I hated those movies, Imaginary and Terrell are not the worst horror film I saw in 2024. My pick for number 7 is, which I will get to after Søren explains his number 7.
As for my number 7, John Lasseter, do me a favor. Kindly retire from Skydance so they can actually flourish as a competent studio for once. My number 7 is Spellbound. I get the film's intended message regarding divorce, but a good message does not good storytelling make. Especially when the animations just die at Pixar, the songs are just die at Disney, the story's hella rushed, and whatever this movie thinks is comedy is about as funny as Joker 2's gang rape scene. After this movie, John Lasseter better take the L for once, because for the past 5 years, he's been thinking he's the great animation legend he once was, when all he is a footnote. So that's why Spellbound is my number 7.
My number 7 is the worst horror film of the year, The Strangers Chapter 1. look, I've never been a fan of the first Strangers film, and I absolutely hated Pray at Night. But man, The Strangers Chapter 1 not only earns the dishonor as being both worse than both of the two combined, but it also earns the award for being the worst horror film I've seen in 2024. As I stated in my worst films of the summer list, not only was the story an idiotic carbon copy of the first Strangers movie, but the directing, especially by Rennie Harlin, was shit. The screenplay and acting were horrible. It wasted good cinematography and the jump scares. The goddamn jump scares. The goddamn jump scares in this movie. The goddamn jump scares in this movie.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
Like, how many fucking times do I have to say this over and over and over again? Jump scares are not scary. If you're going to use jump scares in horror movies, do not use them for the sake of it. You need to build tension and suspense before releasing it. And you know what you shouldn't do when it comes to jump scares? Never overuse them. Sadly, it seems like Rennie Harlin does not know jack shit about horror movies, because not only were the jump scares in The Strangers Chapter 1 there for the sake of it, but they also felt so overused to the point where it started getting on my nerves so much. But if that wasn't enough, how about this idiotic scene where you already know what's coming. You already know what's coming. How about this idiotic scene about the two main leads being the most idiotic characters I've ever seen in a horror film this entire year? Especially with what happens in this one scene towards the third act where you already know what's coming. Where Ryan holds the pinup girl at gunpoint while she's laughing maniacally, and he says this nonsense. Give me one good reason to not fucking kill you right now. Here's a solution. Shoot her with your rifle gun. But no, we want to rip out the first film again where Maya and Ryan are tied up. You know, Ryan, you and your girlfriend would have been safe if you, I don't know.
Shoot them with the fucking
rifle
gun. It is the easiest solution in the whole damn world. What the fuck is your problem?
And if that wasn't enough, not only does it end with the to be continued text shown on screen, but it has one of the most idiotic mid-credit scenes I've ever seen in a movie, where Maya wakes up in the hospital and doesn't notice as she rises up that one of the killers is lying next to her, which means we're gonna get two more of these movies. Two more of these fucking movies. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Lopez. Yeah, it's just, I can't even believe this. We're gonna get two more of these movies. We already have one that's coming later this year. So, God help me with that. Yeah, overall, The Strangers Chapter 1 wins the award for being the worst horror film I've seen in 2024, since it is one of the most infuriatingly idiotic horror movies I've ever seen, and that is why it is number 7 on the list. And the fact we're getting two more of these movies, just, God help me.
My number 6. You already had a perfectly fine documentary on Amy Winehouse, so what made you think you can top it with the director of the first 50 Shades film? My number 6 is back to bullshit. Legitimately, the only thing keeping this from being absolute garbage is Marissa Abella trying her best in the main role. But otherwise, I'm not kidding when I say this is the Patch Adams of music biopics. It makes Amy look like an irredeemable asshole. It goes for more of the cliches you expect in a film like this, from the drugs to the paparazzi and such. And much like Bob Marley, it doesn't tell us more about this figure than you'd find on Wikipedia. I knew very little about it going into this, and coming out of it, I now know even less if that is even possible. Thus, Back to Black is my number 6.
My number 6 is the worst comedy of the year, and that is The Fabulous Four. Or as I like to call it, how to make a 90-minute TikTok commercial disguised as a feature film. Yeah, if you remember back in August, if you remember back a few months ago, I originally gave this a 1 out of 10. But now I dropped it down to a 0 out of 10 because it got worse and worse the more I thought about this one. Like what is it with movies? What is it with some movies trying to have old actresses, like old women overdosing on like ketamine while also burying themselves by being a bunch of fucking idiots? Look, I love Susan Sarandon and I love Bette Midler, but this was shit. And somehow you made Book Club 1 and 2 and 80 for Brady look Academy Award worthy in comparison. I don't know how that's possible, but you did it. You guys did it. You guys did it. You fucking sadist. Not only did it have a generic and idiotic story, an atrocious screenplay and directing, the acting from everybody involved, including Susan Sarandon and Bette Midler, being terrible, especially Bette Midler and Megan Mullally, who were absolutely insufferable as Marilyn and Alice respectively, as well as lackluster cinematography and editing. But I also did not laugh once throughout the entire movie, since all the jokes felt extremely idiotic and juvenile, especially with this one idiotic subplot and running gag where it involves Marilyn's unhealthy obsession with TikTok. Like, this whole subplot involving TikTok felt so shoehorned in. It might as well have been a 90-minute commercial for TikTok. And worst of all, when Lou and Marilyn get into a fight, she says this fucking line. I'm not kidding when she says this. TikTok was mine! You stole it from me! I'm not kidding. She literally says this. She says, TikTok was mine! You stole it from me! Just no. And if Despicable Me 4's ending, where all the characters sing Everybody Wants to Rule the World wasn't bad enough, how about we make that ending look like Shrek with the cast of the Fabulous Four sing and dance to I Could See Clearly Now the Rain Has Gone. I'm not kidding. The whole cast sing and dance to I Could See Clearly Now the Rain Has Gone. Yeah, overall, this is why The Fabulous Four wins the award as being the worst comedy I've seen in 2024. It's one of the most generic, predictable, and embarrassingly idiotic movies I've seen this entire year. And that's why it is number 6.
Before I get to my number 5, I'm going to say this. Do I hate Illumination as much as the majority of the internet does? No. They put out some good stuff like the first 3 Despicable Me movies, the Secret Life of Pets stuff, and while I still don't think the Mario movie is good overall, I still find enjoyment out of it. But watching this movie feels like everything people hate about the studio onto one movie. My number 5 is Despicable Me 4. Unlike the previous movies which had a bit of horror and action, this film just has none of it. All it has are these underdeveloped subplots that do nothing, go nowhere, and barely just get past its feature length. The characters have downgraded. The humor's not just funny, but the humor's just not funny. Like there's at least two graphic toilet jokes for PG rating, and the ending where they
I remember that. That was so idiotic.
And the ending where they
you know what else? As soon as I saw that, I was like, is this movie for kids or what?
And the ending where they ruined Tears for Fears alone put this as high as it is. I'm just hopeful they turn things around with the Mario sequel soon, because this was just a disaster from start to finish. Hence the number 5 spot.
My number 5, we already talked about this earlier, so I might as well bring this up one last time. Number 5 is the second of the Sony Spider-Man universe movies, Kraven the Hunter. I never thought I would have to talk about this fucking movie again. Kraven the Hunter is yet another shameless albatross of terrible filmmaking and storytelling in the Sony Spider-Man universe movies. And not just that, it was so fucking boring. Which is shocking because J.C. Chandler has directed some good movies in the past, like Margin Call, All Is Lost, and A Most Violent Year. So I don't know what happened here, given how poorly directed it was. But it's not just poorly directed. The acting sucks as well, especially with Aaron Taylor Johnson looking like he was sleepwalking throughout as Kraven. Ariana DeBose, who I really like and was magnificent in West Side Story 2021, terrible in this movie, along with Chris Abbott and Alessandro Nivola, and with Russell Crowe, dear God. He was so horrible. I stated this before and I'll state this again. He was so horribly miscast as Nikolai Kravinoff, especially with how fake his Russian accent sounded. The editing was atrocious, especially with some very noticeable ADR dubbing they provided, and some CGI lips, and the fact they had to CGI the lips to make it like match up to the dialogue, which, good grief. The action sequences aren't that exciting, dude.
Well, which is worse, have that or a certain other movie, Man Web, where the dialogue doesn't even match his lips.
And we will mention that later. And you know what? That's a good question. The action sequences aren't that exciting due to the lack of tension these sequences provided. And worst of all, aside from the other 2 films I'll mention later on, this has some of the worst CGI effects I've seen in the movie this entire year. Most of them looked very sloppy, and some of them looked unfinished to the point where it felt like I was watching a PS2 video game instead of a theatrically released movie. How it cost over $110 to $100 million to make is still something I'll never understand. And the ending was absolutely pathetic, especially with how it tries to tie it all up for a sequel. Oh wait! It made over $53 million at the box office under its $110 to $130 million budget. So nice try, Sony. Nice try. Yeah, overall, Kraven the Hunter is one of the most contrived, boring, and convoluted comic book films I've ever seen, and that's why it is at number 5.
My number 4. Remember when I talked about Borderlands, where I said there were 2 movies that most encapsulate everything wrong with Hollywood? Well, the other one is definitely Red One.
That's also my number 4.
A movie that's basically
Let's jump in.
A movie that's just basically Jumanji in a Christmas setting sounds like it has a ton of potential, but this turned out to be an overprocessed, overhyped, and overbudgeted train wreck. This movie disregards any holiday spirit this might have had and replaces it with unlikable and boring characters, CGI that clearly doesn't show its budget, and scenes that are just there for exposition. Between this and Moana 2, this has not been a good year for Dwayne Johnson, especially after the allegations of him showing up late and pissing in balls around the set to the point where the budget just inflated beyond control. By the way,
$250 million it cost to make.
By the way, keep in mind that both Godzilla Minus One and The Brutalist cost less than a tenth of this movie's budget and look flawless as fuck. So yeah, this is everything wrong with Hollywood system today. Guilt-tripped actors, exposition up the ass, overproduced CGI, and just no soul whatsoever.
Not to mention, this was so cynical and mean-spirited throughout. Like this is Red One is one of those movies where not only is the film full of cliches that you've seen in other films before, to the point where you can easily predict on how the story will turn out and what the message of the film is, but it also left me with such a very bad taste in my mouth with how depressingly mean-spirited and cynical it felt. Like nearly every fucking character in this movie, including Chris Evans's character Jack, is a goddamn one-dimensional idiot. And speaking of the acting, not only was Chris Evans terrible in the film, but so were Dwayne Johnson and especially J.K. Simmons, who looks like he was sleepwalking while playing Santa Claus. I was also very disappointed in Dan Mandel's cinematography, especially with how much of a shaking in some parts. And once again, we're talking about the same guy that did the cinematography for some of the movies that J.J. Abrams directed, like whether it's Star Trek Into Darkness or the Star Wars The Force Awakens. Wait, what? He did?
I'll look that up. You go ahead.
Either that or you're thinking of Coppola. Yeah, Red Dildo is more like it.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of Coppola.
Ethan. It's Coppola that defended Victor Salva. But let's not forget how horrendous the CGI effects looked. $250 million it cost to make, and yet it looked so ugly and cheap. Especially in some parts of the film where you could clearly see the actors standing or flailing around in a fucking green screen. You know, $200 million could be spent on the poor kids and their parents who are like starving for food. Not this cheap, ugly-looking, and mean-spirited movie that's basically nothing more than an excuse to call this a Christmas film. Yeah, overall, I hate this movie. And before I end this, do you want to know what was the worst new Christmas movie I saw since I started doing movie reviews back in 2013? A Bad Mom's Christmas. Yeah, when I saw A Bad Mom's Christmas back in 2017, I thought I had seen the worst movie to be written. I thought I had seen the worst modern Christmas movie ever. Well, now that I saw Red One, Well, now that I saw Red One, it has took the cake as being the worst modern Christmas movie I've ever seen. Red One is one of the most mean-spirited, idiotic, depressingly cynical, and reprehensible Christmas movies I've ever seen, and that's why it is Søren and I's number 4 worst.
Number 3 is yet another kids movie that sucked ass. It sucked so much ass that not even Netflix wanted to take this movie, and that's saying something because they said yes to cuties. Anyways, my number 3 is Harold and the Purple Dildo. The only thing more annoying than Zachary Levi trying and failing to be Shazam again after the last movie bombed the year before is his 2 obnoxious sidekicks who tagged along for some reason. This movie tries to have heart, it just fails. It just falls flat because not only is it a humongous ripoff of Barbie, but there's too many plot holes in this movie that I can count. The villain's just there, the CGI is just abysmal, and all it does is make me wish I was reading the book it was based on or even watched the cartoon it inspired 20 years ago. The only reason why it's not one of the worst movies I've ever seen is because the animation in the beginning and end, and even then it's not enough to save this movie, so that's my number 3, Harold and the Purple Dildo.
Number 3 is the worst remake of the year, The Crow. Let me get my VHS. I'll be right back for a second. All right, I'm back. And yes, what you're seeing, number 3, is one of the greatest action movies I've ever seen in my life. The original Crow is a masterpiece in filmmaking when it comes to action movies. It is a masterpiece in filmmaking when it comes to action movies. It's also very influential because really think about it. If we didn't have The Crow, if the original Crow wasn't made, we wouldn't have The Dark Knight. The remake of The Crow, on the other hand, is one of the worst remakes I've ever seen in my life. It is not only one of the most cynical and reprehensible reboots I've ever seen, but it's also a complete slap in the face to not only the original film, starring Brandon Lee, but of the graphic novel as well. It completely misses the point of what made The Crow not only a special film, but also a wonderful graphic novel in the first place. The screenplay absolutely sucked. It's not just because of terrible dialogue and bland characterization, but it's also because of how it relies so much on exposition, and it got on my nerves real quick. The story was an incompetent mess. Rupert Sanders' directing was atrocious. The acting was terrible. Bill Skarsgård really tries to give it his all as Eric Draven, but all that felt horribly wasted, especially with how poorly written his character felt. And Danny Houston was absolutely terrible as the villain named Vincent. And honestly, I'm getting really sick and tired of Danny Houston playing the same villain character over and over and over again. Not to mention that the chemistry between Bill Skarsgård and FKA Twigs felt shallow and soulless. And my God, the fucking pacing in this in The Crow 2024. I'm not kidding when I say that this is some of the worst pacing I've ever seen in a movie this entire year. Since for a movie that's 110 minutes long, and that's including credits, it felt like it was going on for 3 hours. I seriously could have fallen asleep during the film, but I had to stay awake to finish the entire thing. And I'll rant on that in a bit, Justin. Don't worry. And even the action sequences and kills weren't all that impressive. Now, are they decently choreographed? Sure. But in terms of how they were shot, edited, and directed, yikes! Not to mention, the visual effects in this movie are some of the sloppiest I've ever seen in 2024. And the ending was a complete slap in the face, since it tries to set up everything for a sequel, which guess what? It didn't even make its budget back. Under its $50 million budget, it made under $25 million worldwide. Nice try, Lionsgate. And also Rupert Sanders, nice try as well, because this ties to what I'm about to say. Like, who the hell do you think you are making this tone-deaf statement after the movie flopped? I'm not kidding. After after the movie flopped, he had the audacity to blame the critics and audiences for the movie's failure by saying this. I think a lot of people are very active online and not so active in life. Get out and do something and have less time throwing stones. I think it would be great just people to know that this is a reimagining and wildly different from the original, and that the original's still there. I have it recorded over anyone's VHS. You can still go and see that movie. I hope this movie resonates with people who loved that movie when they were in their teens. This is my version of the text. It is my adaptation of James's graphic novel, which I love. Like Rupert, there's a reason why both critics and audiences hated this movie. Nobody wanted this, and because the film was absolute garbage.
And not to mention, have you ever considered that people hate your movie not because it's a remake, but because it's a bad remake?
Exactly. And when Alex Proyas hated your movie, you know we got a problem.
And considering that's the guy who directed Gods of Egypt, that's saying something.
And guess what he also directed? The original Crow! So guess what, Rupert Sanders? Your statement is completely invalid. I have a thing I want to tell you by the way, Rupert Sanders. Please go outside and touch some grass. And I don't blame them for naming it the worst film of 2024. It's not the worst movie I saw in 2024. As there are two more movies that I hated more than this, but by golly, this is definitely deserving of the top 3 worst. Like, and also you are also insulting the people that not only love the original, but love the graphic novel that it was based on as well. So who the hell do you think you are? Trying to say that tone deaf statement like that. Fuck you, dude. Yeah, The Crow is one of the most reprehensible reboots I've ever seen, and a complete slap in the face to fans of the graphic novel as well as the original film. And that's why The Crow is earning the bronze. It's not only taking home the award for the worst remake / reboot of 2024, but it's also taking the bronze medal as being the third worst movie of 2024. And hello, William the Conqueror. Welcome to the podcast. You're just in time to see Søren and I rant on our top 2. So. All right, so I know we're going to do something a bit different here. Usually Søren goes over his number 2, and I go over my number 2, but Søren has a different number 1 than I do, and his number 2 is my number 1. So I'm going to announce my number 2 first. Folks, for the first time since 2017, I have given 2 movies a rare -1 out of 10 or a super F. These movies gave me some of the worst experiences I've ever had ever since I started doing movie reviews. Like these movies I'm talking about are like the Emoji Movie and Dirty Grandpa bad. And at number 2 was the worst movie. Sorry. And at number 2 is the worst movie I've seen this summer. And that film is Borderlands. You know, I struggled juggling back and forth between Borderlands and another film I'm about to mention soon on which one will be number 2 and number 1. But after careful thinking, Borderlands takes second place. Even as someone who's never played the games, even I knew how much of a gigantic piece of shit this was. Borderlands isn't just one of, if not the worst movie based on a video game I've ever seen. It is also one of the ugliest and most reprehensible movies I've seen in general, too. It is a huge insult to not only fans. It is a huge insult to not only fans of the games, but to the audience's intelligence as well. Not only was the story such an incomprehensible mess, but this also had one of the year's worst screenplays, and that's due to these following things. Characters that come across as being one-dimensional and unlikable, including not only Tiny Tina, but also Claptrap, who is absolutely one of the worst movie characters I've ever seen in a movie in general. Poorly written dialogue, and tedious exposition dumps that got on my nerves real quick. I know there are some people that say, "Oh, it was Eli Roth's movie. It was Eli Roth's movie, and the studio butchered his vision." Number 1, I don't care. And number 2, he butchered Craig Mason's vision he originally had for the film. So he's at fault too. Eli Roth is at fault too. And number 3, there is no excuse for poor direction. Like, this is some of the worst directing I've ever seen in a movie this entire year. And what pisses me off about this is that people thought Joe Crombie was a pseudonym for Craig Mason, even though Craig Mason stated that he had no involvement with this. And Craig Mason is the only person I actually feel sympathy for, because he had a vision for what he wanted the Borderlands movie to be, especially coming off the first season of The Last of Us. But again, Eli Roth, the Lionsgate executives, Avi Arad, and Randy Pitchford are to blame for this. And it also shows why Eli Roth is one of my most hated filmmakers working today. I would have hated this guy even more if that was the case. But that's not the only reason why this movie sucks. Oh no, there's more. The acting was terrible. Poor Cate Blanchett is so bad in this movie as Lilith, especially coming up her Oscar nomination for Tar. Like, what the shit?
And especially considering that she's way older than her character is supposed to be in the video game.
Exactly. Ariana Greenblatt was absolutely insufferable as Tina. Kevin Hart, Edgar Ramirez, Gina Gershon, and especially Jamie Lee Curtis are all horribly wasted in this movie since they're not given that much to do in the film. But that's nothing compared to Jack Black as the voice of Claptrap. Oh my god, I cannot stand I cannot stand this fucking character. To say that this is Jack Black's worst performance he's given out in his career would be a massive understatement. Claptrap is nothing but an annoying comic relief just for the sake of it, making wisecracking jokes that nobody wants to hear. Especially in oh my god. Especially in the mid-credits, especially in the credits scene, where he's especially going, oh, how about more jokes from me? You want to hear me be more annoying with my jokes? Here are my jokes. Here are my jokes. Please stay for my jokes. Please stay. Please.
Oh, shut up!
Thank you. This also has some of the worst cinematography and editing I've seen this entire year, which is the biggest reason why I hated the action sequences in this movie. Especially since I couldn't tell what the hell was even going on. And good grief, the visual effects. The motherfucking visual effects in Borderlands. $110 to $120 million it cost to make, and the visual effects in this movie look absolutely abysmal. Especially since not only when some of them are unfinished, but when most of them look like something out of a fucking PS2 game. Overall, Borderlands is a shameless slap in the face to fans of the games, and it is one of the ugliest and most reprehensible movies I've ever seen. And that's why it earns the silver medal as being the second worst movie I've seen in 2024. But as bad as Borderlands is, that's nothing compared to what I consider not only the worst movie I've seen this year, but it has now dethroned Dear Evan Hansen as being the absolute worst movie that I have seen this entire fucking decade so far.
Yep. My number 2 and next number 1. This movie has been a complete nightmare. This was the movie that made us apologize to Morbius. This was the first 0 out of 10 I've given since Boss Baby 2. This movie was such a cinematic abortion in every level that I never thought anything would top it, until a certain movie we'll get to later came into the spotlight. It is an abomination that we come to know as Madam Web.
Madam Web. This piece of fucking shit!
Madam Web is the cream of the crop of the Spidey-less Spider-Man universe, and is indeed so terrible that one achieves the meaning of life by the closing credits. From the performances that are directed so that all the actors look like emotionless robots who just discovered what humanity is, and even then failing, to the CGI that looks like something out of a PS1 video game, especially when it came to the frantic dream sequences where the camera spins around like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air intro, to the endless exposition unlike anything in the real human world, to the point where the ADR is severely obvious, to the Easter eggs that might as well have been the rotten egg from Charlotte's Web, where they put to the great responsibility line and shoehorn Peter Parker into this. To especially the excess product placement for Pepsi, to the point where it's the very thing that saves today, to even pulling a Michael Bay and reusing footage and music cues from unrelated Spider-Man media. Is there any wonder why this has become 2024's favorite punching bag that has nothing to do with the presidential election? And it would have been an easy number 1 for me if it weren't for a certain movie I have a vendetta against. And we'll get to that in a little bit.
Let me tell you, no movie this year tested my patience, angered me this much, made me go physically insane, and made me even question my love of movies, and gave me the false hope that movies were getting worse, and that a film was coming to give me an early ticket to retirement, the way Madam Web did. Madam Web isn't just the worst in the Sony Spider-Man universe movies, but this is also one of the very worst comic book movies I've ever seen in my life. This is one of those movies where not only are you left feeling stunned and baffled at what you just saw, to the point where you find yourself asking how and why the hell this movie even got made. But you also feel like that the movie basically wasted your time with how inept, idiotic, incompetent, and inconsistent the whole thing felt. I have seen some bad comic book films this decade so far. I have seen some really bad comic book movies this decade so far. Whether it's Venom Let There Be Carnage, or the recent Venom The Last Stand, Thor Love and Thunder, Black Adam, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, The Flash, and even the infamous Morbius and Joker Folia Juju, as well as Kraven the Hunter. But to say that this movie makes those, to say that Madam Web makes those movies look like masterpieces in comparison, really shows on how much I absolutely loathe this piece of shit. First off, the screenplay was horrendous. This was written by the same jackasses that brought us Morbius and Gods of Egypt, along with S.J. Clarkson and Claire Parker. And I don't know how they managed to make an even worse screenplay than Morbius, but somehow they did it. Not only is the writing filled with characters that come across as being either paper thin, one-dimensional, or unlikable for the sake of it, but if you were hoping that the movie would feature Julia, Anna, and Natty, all becoming the spider, on how all that became Spider Women, I'm sorry to tell you that the movie doesn't even do so, because, and I'm not making this up, according to the director S.J. Clarkson, when she was asked why the Spider Women weren't given origin stories in the film, she literally stated, "Well, I thought it would be too greedy to do for them. That's not really fair, is it? Like, are you fucking kidding me? This is not a comic book movie. This is a comic book movie, not freaking religion." If you thought I was done talking about the horrendous writing, though, oh no, there's more to why this sucks. This is some of the worst dialogue I've ever heard in the movie. The dialogue is so bad that you could have sworn that they got a chat GPT or some type of other artificial intelligence to write the screenplay for them in under an hour. Especially with the line from the villain, like, "Trust me, you're lucky you didn't know today was the day you were going to die." As well as the infamous, you wouldn't like me when I'm hangry," said twice by one of the teenage girls throughout the entire film. And how about this pathetic piece of dialogue, where after Cassandra looks over her mother's journal and says, "I hope the spiders were worth it, Mom," as well as Cassandra almost hits one of the girls as she drives an ambulance, and after she gets flipped up by one of the girls, she says, "Who flips out the ambulance? Seriously." And worst of all,
and not to mention this line in the trailer, he was in the Amazon when my mom, when she was researching spiders, went right before she died. Is this even real dialogue?
like, you can't be this stupid! You can't be this stupid! And worst of all, to describe how bad the writing is, it's also obsessed with spouting exposition dumps just to make the audience look stupid. Like I stated last year, when I had The Exorcist Believers, my worst film of 2023, this type of writing, where they rely so much on exposition dumps, really pisses me off to no end, because by doing that, they're treating the audience like they're a bunch of idiots because they're not going to get it. This shit needs to stop. Second, this movie has some of the worst acting I've seen this entire year. Dakota Johnson, she's a great actress, and she's a very talented actress, and she has been great in other films like Black Mass, Bad Times at the El Royale, The Peanut Butter Falcon, and The Lost Daughter. And even despite the fact that I'm not a fan of the Suspiria remake and Cha-Cha Real Smooth, she actually gave out a really good performance in those films. But in this movie, what the hell happened here? Johnson was so so bad in this movie as Cassandra Webb. And that's mainly due to how lifeless and shallow it felt. I don't know if it's how the screenplay portrayed her character or not, but it really seemed like she didn't even want to be there. And well, can you really blame her? Because of how fucking shit this movie is? And to make matters worse, you don't care about her character whatsoever due to how much of a fucking asshole she is throughout, that you honestly wish for this character to just die. I honestly never thought I would say this, but this is not only the worst performance I've seen from a lead actress this entire year, but this is the worst performance from Dakota Johnson. Yes, even worse than when she played Anastasia Steele in the 50 Shades trilogy. That's how bad her performance is. Sydney Sweeney, Isabella Merced. Thank you! And on top of Sydney Sweeney, Isabella Merced, Celeste O'Connor, and Adam Scott all being horribly wasted in this movie, as well as Emma Roberts being horribly miscast as Mary Parker. Tahar Brahim, who was really good in A Prophet, is horribly miscast as Ezekiel Sims. And it comes down... Why? Because it comes down to this. The editing is the worst I've ever seen in a motion picture. Like, if you thought the ADR dubs in... Same here, Justin. And if you thought the ADR dubs in Kraven the Hunter were bad, oh no. The ADR dubs in Madam Web are even worse. Because there's this one line where his character says, I will find him and kill him first. Yet that line, as well as some of the other lines he says throughout the film, do not match up to the actor's lips. They don't match up to his lips. I would be lying if I didn't say that this is even worse than those ADR dubs for those atrocious Steven Seagal direct-to-video movies in terms of how bad the ADR sounded. But that's not the only reason why the editing sucks. Oh no, there's more. There were so many times throughout the entire movie where the movie relies too much on quick cut edits, as well as spazzing out in some parts, that I literally thought the movie was having a goddamn seizure. Like, did Sony get a toddler or a kindergartner to edit this movie? Oh my god. Fourth, I thought Morbius, when I saw it back in 2022, had one of, if not the worst CGI visual effects I've ever seen them in a comic book movie. I was wrong. Dead wrong. The CG of visual effects in Madam Web look more abysmal than in Morbius. This movie cost nearly $100 million to make. $100 million to make! And not once did any of them look convincing, especially since not only did a lot of them look so sloppy to the point where they looked like they looked like something out of a PlayStation 2 game, but some of them looked unfinished. We live in the year 2024. I mean, we now live in the year 2025, and yet the studios can't learn to take their time with a visual effects artist by making the CGI look good and convincing, and instead rush it to the point where they look so half-assed and something out of a PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 3 game from the 2000s, I should mention. Like, come on! This is why Madam Web earns the award for having the worst visual effects I've seen in a motion picture in 2024. And finally, the unforgivable nods and references to Peter Parker. This is one of the biggest reasons why this is one of the very worst comic book movies I've ever seen, because the nods and references they provided involving Peter Parker and Spider-Man are absolutely insulting and unforgivable, especially of how they serve no purpose whatsoever, especially when they don't even bother saying his name. Like in this one scene where Cassandra Webb goes for a baby shower, since Mary Parker, played by Emma Roberts, is pregnant with Peter Parker, the movie all of a sudden calls timeout for the ladies to play a game called Guess the Baby's Name, and yet right before Cassandra guesses Peter, she gets called out of the room before she could say his name, and even when Peter Parker is born towards the end of the film, guess what? His name is not mentioned either!
And no, movie, you don't get brownie points for the screen door looking kind of like a web, but not really.
Yeah, really. Like, oh my god! We the audience know that it's fucking Peter Parker! And you expect me to believe that Sony does not have the balls of saying Peter Parker's name, even despite the fact that they own the rights to the character? Are you fucking kidding me, Sony?
You can't be this stupid! You can't! You can't be this stupid! You can't!
Just wait, Justin, just wait. But the worst aspect about this... Okay. You know what, Justin? We're going to get to that. We are going to get to that right now. Oh, and by the way, the ending where Ezekiel Sins dies after being oh my god. You know what? The way Ezekiel Sins dies after being squashed by the Pepsi Cola sign? Oh my god. Oh yeah. And Justin, I'm about to get to what that bitch ass CEO said. What this bonehead CEO, Tony Vinciquerra, recently said in response to the critics, in response to Kraven the Hunter and Madam Web flopping. According to Variety, he stated, Madam Web underperformed in the theaters because the press just crucified it. It was not a bad film, and it did great on Netflix. And for some reason, actually, I'm going to do this in a different way. I'm going to do this in a Tommy Wiseau way. And because I'm half Italian, I get to do this. Madam Web underperformed in the theaters because
because the press just crucified it. It was not a bad film, and it did great on Netflix. And for some reason, the press decided that they didn't want us making these movies out of Kraven or Madam Web, and the critics just destroyed them. They also did it with Venom, but the audience loved Venom and made Venom a massive hit. These are not terrible films. They were just destroyed by the critics and the press for some reason. And regarding the failure of Kraven the Hunter, unfortunately, Kraven the Hunter that we launched last weekend, and my last film launch is probably the worst launch we had in the last 7.5 years. So that didn't work out very, very well, which I don't understand, because the film is not a bad film. Yes, they were terrible films, Tony. Are you stupid?
If you seriously think these are good movies, then you have failed as an entertainment CEO.
Yeah, Root. I'm gonna play this clip one more time. I'm gonna play this clip one more time.
You can't be this stupid! You can't!
Like, oh my God. If that isn't the most tone-deaf statement I've ever heard from a CEO, then I don't know what the fuck is. Just because it did well on Netflix does not mean it's good. If the critics and the audiences hate it, then they have a good reason to hate the movie, you fucking jackass! Yeah, I'm not going to be around the bush with this one. I hated Madam. I am not going to be around the bush with Madam Web overall. I hated Madam Web. I hated everything about this incompetent, idiotic, contrived, and reprehensible piece of shit. Madam Web.
You know what, Tony? No, take it.
Elegant? Why call that just rude? If I was just a little bigger, I'd go and bash them up.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Seriously. I am not going to, overall, I'm not going to be around the bush with Madam Web. I hated this movie. I hated everything about this incompetent, idiotic, contrived, and reprehensible piece of shit. Madam Web isn't just the worst movie in the Sony Spider-Man universe I've ever seen. And it isn't just one of the worst comic movies I've ever seen in my life. It's also one of the ugliest and most reprehensible and incompetent movies I've ever seen in my life. And congratulations, Madam Web, to the idiots that made Madam Web. You just trumped Dear Evan Hansen as being the worst movie I've seen this decade so far. Yeah, would I rather watch Dear Evan Hansen more than this piece of shit ever again? You know you made one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life. Yeah, that's why, and without a doubt, that is why Dear Evan Hansen is the worst movie I have seen this decade so far.
Madam Web.
I'm sorry, thank you. And that is why, see what this movie did to me? It just made me forget the title. And that is why Madam Web is, without a doubt, the worst movie I have seen in 2024 and the worst movie that I've seen this decade so far. Fuck this movie. Fuck this movie. Fuck it straight to hell with a dirty dick.
Well, it's all come down to this. My number one worst movie I've seen in 2024. And not saying a lot because of how bad Madame Web was. And let me tell you something. At least to me, Madame Web was fascinating in how bad it was. This movie was annoying. Unmercifully annoying. Never have I wasted an hour and a half on a movie that does nothing but pander to its audience every step of the way. This movie not only showcases everything wrong with kids' entertainment today, but it also showcases what people who say animation is for kids think all animated movies are. My number one is Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie. Now, did I go into a movie about Sandy Cheeks expecting an Oscar-winning masterpiece? No. Do I think a movie like this has potential to be at least an entertaining watch? Sure. Do I think this will set the standard for all those SpongeBob spin-offs Nickelodeon has planned down the line? No. But for a movie that came out at the 25th anniversary of SpongeBob, this should have been way better. This movie tries to explore Sandy's escapades outside the main SpongeBob timeline, and boy did they fucking fail. First off, what the hell even is this animation? It looks like something you'd find in an early 2000 tie-in video game, except somehow even cheaper. The effects honestly make Madame Web look like Lord of the Rings by comparison, because not once did I believe the CGI characters and certain elements share the same screen as the live-action backgrounds. The characters are just obnoxious. From SpongeBob, who's turned into...
I'm going to let you take the floor because I'll be right back for a second. I'm going to let you take the floor.
All right. The characters are just obnoxious. From SpongeBob, who's turned to Patrick's on Season 6, to Cindy's extended family, who are nothing but country-style stereotypes, and obnoxious ones at that, to the main villain, who wants to turn the Yokai creatures into marketable plussies. Speaking of which, not only is the way one of the sex plays creepy as hell, like she wants to straight up fuck these creatures, but doesn't it seem hypocritical that Nickelodeon treats this as the villain, while at the same time turn their IPs into marketable shit? And not just that, this movie tries so hard to be funny that it just gives me a migraine every single time they throw in quote-unquote wacky visuals that's more creepy than anything, throw in a random musical number or just attempt at humor. Want me to give you some highlights? No? Well, too fucking bad. I set those attempts at humor so you're gonna suffer with me whether you like it or not. Exhibit A. Everything I loved is gone. All my streaming videos on demand, I can't demand them anymore. Exhibit B. Is mayonnaise a wire? Exhibit C. The flashback where we see the main villain as a young kid and he just sticks her at her bed onto a child's body and call it a day. Exhibit B. Despite the show clearly stating Sandy as a land squirrel, she suddenly gets these flapping wings so that she can glide. Exhibit E. SpongeBob taking his brain out and splitting it in half so that they have to fight each other. Exhibit F. SpongeBob wigging so hard that his eyelashes get tied together, giving them the idea to use him as a guitar. Exhibit G. Patrick started using the bathroom because then it's comedy, apparently. Exhibit H. SpongeBob coming across a fresh pile of shit on the ground and proceeding to sniff it, which might as well be the ultimate metaphor for this movie. I could go on, but these are just some of the many bits of humor that they just put in for the sake of humor, to the point where literally half of this movie is just stopping the story in favor of jingling their keys in front of everyone and the audience. You know, movie, you're a fucking joke. No wonder Nickelodeon dumped you on Netflix, because they'll say fucking anything. I mean, you are a ridiculous, immature, half-wit, moronic piece of corporate slob. I have never met a sadder, more attention-starved insult to my intelligence in my entire life, and not saying a lot because I've been alive for over 25 fucking years. And I'll tell you, The animation community is right about one thing. You will never be good for anything. You couldn't even muster the courage to defend yourself from being leaked on Twitter 6 months earlier. And motherfucker, I wish I could say Nickelodeon better learn from their mistakes after you came out, but just about the fact that the Skydance merger means that John Lasseter is going to be the new CEO is one of God's best jokes that they won't learn, except it's on all of us. I hated this movie. Hated this movie. Hated it. Hated every sibling, stupid, vacant, audience-insulting moment of it. Hated the sensibility that not anyone would even like it. Hated the implied insult to the intelligence by his belief that anyone would be entertained by it. And I just don't despise this movie for what was on screen, even though that's more than fucking true. I despise this movie because of what it represents for both kids' entertainment and animation as a whole today. I despise this movie because it is the cocomelon of cinema. The kind of entertainment that parents think they can just show to their children and call it a day. And this is the extent of what you're showing to your children. You have failed as a parent. Because children deserve so much better than this. They deserve to be disciplined. They deserve to be challenged. They deserve to be exposed to entertainment that not only tries to entertain them, but also give them a good story. Well-written characters and pleasing production values. You want to know why Inside 2 has made so much money? You want to know why either Flo or The Wild Robot are the current frontrunners to win the Oscar? And you want to know why stuff like Bluey, Sesame Street, and others continue to be popular among not just the kids but adults too? Because they fucking tried. They tried to give something new outside flashy animation and pop culture references just to tinkle their keys. But the fact that movies like Saving Bikini Bottom continue to be made just show us that people don't have this kind of respect for family entertainment. And that's why this is hands down my worst film of 2024. Not just because of what's on screen, but what it represents for animation as a whole. And let me leave you with this very quote. Animation is cinema, animation is a genre, and animation is ready to be taken to the next step. So yeah, fuck this movie, and fuck everything it stands for.
Damn, dude. And Mr. Lopez, I correct what I said about animation and genre, and Ethan to re-answer that question. My favorite types of genre are drama and horror. That's it. But yeah, guys, animation is cinema and animation is medium. Animation is respected as a medium. Enough said. And also, let me just say this right. Let me just say this one last time to help you with your anger towards Saving Bikini Bottom, the Sandy Cheeks movie, Søren. Fuck you, Nickelodeon. Fuck you.
Indeed.
I know. I'm worn out too. I'm worn out too from all this. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed tonight's podcast, and we're already tuckered out. We're already tuckered out from having to vent our frustrations on the worst that we saw in 2024. I mean, you see what these films did to us? Just, and people think that like they love seeing the worst films of the year more because of how much you get to vent out your frustrations towards movies one last time. But personally, I love doing the best movies of the year list more because I just love celebrating great movies. And that is exactly what is happening at the end of January. I mean at the beginning of February. On February 1st, we're going to be presenting our list of the top 20 best films that both Søren and I saw in 2024. And I can't wait to share the list with you guys. I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what's gonna happen on February 1st. We'll present our last remaining 2024 movie reviews before we present our top 20 best films in 2024 list. I hope you guys enjoyed a really rage-filled podcast tonight. I had a lot of fun doing so. even despite my frustrations towards these piece of shit movies. But thank you as always for watching. And as always, be sure to subscribe to Søren Saunders on his YouTube channel. The link is in the description below. Give him the love he absolutely deserves. He's a creative guy and a really fun friend to talk to. And also, I'll have a link to 2 videos involving the Disney fanatics. One involving the Meat Canyon video where he lambasts the Disney adults, and the other where Jay Vaders talks about the battle between Sonic 3 and Mufasa and why it's absolutely ridiculous. So the link will be down. The link to those videos will be in the description down below. Hope you guys had a lot of fun watching the podcast. And as always, until we see you again on February 1st, hope you guys have a good weekend, have a great night, and as always, Happy New Year, guys.